Well, not only did I manage to completely mess up the time zones, I also managed to mess up the technology there. But I think you got the gist. Welcome to this literary-themed edition of the Echo Chamberlain livestream. It's great to have you with us, whatever time zone you are in the world. So let's get the guests out. Of the top 10 books banned in the United States public school library system, 5 of them have been written by my first guest. Titles such as How We Can All Get Along and Build a Unified Society, How to Live Responsibly and Independently While Loving One's Neighbors, and Toward a True American Utopia of Harmony and Togetherness were flagged by federal authorities as having a dangerous potential to unify and calm down the populace, resulting in the flood of rage-driven political donations to Washington elites dwindling to a trickle. Here to express his frustrations at the hypocrisy is, if I can find him again, Mr. Greg Owen.
Here I am. I'm going to take on Washington, but first, I'm going to take on this stream with you, sir. Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's good to have you. I hope I didn't throw you for a loop with the time differences. It's all very confusing. I relied on ChatGPT to tell me what the times were, and it didn't work out too well.
Wait, are you saying ChatGPT got something wrong? Because that doesn't make any sense. I know. It's excellent.
It's deeply confusing. Always. Yeah. What's new, my friend? What's going on? I haven't seen a video from you for a little while.
You know what? I looked into it today. I worked, I had a little work issue, and I had, it was a 90-hour week last week and the week before, but that's all over. That's behind me now. And so I'm going to get back into making videos, and I'm excited to do it. I have my first member thing this week too. I'm very excited.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Oh, you have had it, or you're going to have it?
Going to have it Thursday night. My first member live stream thing for my second tier members. I'm gonna see how that goes.
Oh, right. Second tier members. So that's the riffraff, right. They finally get their little hit of Greg Owen.
That's right. They get the pleasure of knowing there's coffee in my cup because of them.
So like an Ask Greg Anything kind of stream.
No, it's a it's going to be like, well, it's I'm hoping that it will be like a book club style, but this week or this month we're going to sort of work out Iron the Kinks out. But we're going to work on a video together is the idea. That's what I'm hoping, is that I'll get input for everybody and we'll just sort of collectively do a big group project, which I will execute. And then the members get to kind of speak into a video, and they get to have their ideas. They get to put their, whatever jokes, whatever the little cutaways that I do, they'll suggest those. I'm hoping that they really, I'm hoping for a lot of feedback on that, and they really get to feel like they influence the video, and that we kind of work on it together, and we'll chit chat the whole time too. So hopefully we'll see how it goes.
Brilliant. Sounds great. What day is that?
It's going to be Thursday, 2 days from now at 6 o'clock Central, I think.
Okay. Well, after Apple was forced to surrender backdoor access to the UK government, my next guest had his private information and even holiday snaps accessed and disseminated online by several unctuous bureaucrats in the British Home Office. To his despair, there are now freely available images of him as a derpified grok on holiday in Bermuda, as a derpified grok cosplaying as Gandalf, and as a derpified grok wearing battle armor. Here to expound on his frustrations with the shocking, blatant intrusion is a random film talk.
Oh God, yeah, I was in Disney World in Florida the other month, and I was just trying to hide. These guys kept jumping out of bushes with cameras. It was not a fun experience.
No, I'm sure it isn't. How are you, my friend? What's up?
Yeah, doing good. Thank you for having me back on. I've just been very busy working on some videos and doing the occasional stream, which has been quite a lot of fun. Trying to not get ill, because everyone near me seems to be ill at the moment, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's just England being England, but yeah.
Oh, well, it's good to have you on as always. As we wait for Despot, who has a few responsibilities, I'll introduce today's featured guest. Today's featured guest is a writer, editor, consultant on literary manuscripts, emerging YouTuber with shrewd and very welcome takes on the contemporary publishing industry, and in a neatly circular coincidence, was also the ghostwriter for all of Greg Owen's books. She is Kristin McTiernan. Welcome.
Hello. I wish I was Greg's ghostwriter.
This isn't the first time. The membership thing, that's not the first time that I've used other people's work, put my name on it. Come on now. It's a pattern.
If ever you want to give me money, I will accept it.
We're going to find something.
What is the landscape like with ChatGPT and AI? Because I'm finding I used to do a bit of work with PR and communications, and it just the flood died to a trickle because I think people are just using their own technology to handle problems that used to actually be done with human beings.
It's quite pervasive. Now you can always tell the authors who are giving it a shot for the first time, and they think that no one will be able to tell because to them it sounds good because they don't know the AI isms. But of course, I can spot them from a mile away. So a big part of my job on the nonfiction side of things is to take an AI generated book and make it not sound AI. Fiction, they're a little better at it. They'll go through and they'll edit it after, but I'll still catch them sometimes. I'll fix it for them.
It's interesting because in the last 10% of when I was writing my new novel, I started finding myself using ChatGPT as an actual tool. And I'm trying to sort of figure out if it was kind of how it sat with me morally. Because if, for example, describe the interiors of a sixth form college in Camden, London, 1989, with the student social milieu and local haunts where they would go, into that and 10 seconds later it comes up with absolutely everything I need. And then I can just cherry pick all that information and aestheticize it into literature. I mean, it's great, but I don't know how it sits with me because something else is doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but at the same time, it would take me forever to access all that information when I'm hot on the trail of wanting to get the scene done and in that headspace. So how do you think we manage that, or authors manage that?
I think as a tool, everyone has to make their own choices. For me, I use Claude rather than ChatGPT, but it's very, very helpful when it comes to historical, but like near historical. So for instance, I needed to know a housing development, I guess they call them council estates in Scotland in 1993. They wouldn't have had that on the internet, but they had it on Claude and I was able to verify it. So that was very helpful. But as far as a lot of authors use it for outlining, especially for blurbs, it's very popular because blurb writing is a different skill than novel writing. And especially, if they're doing the trendy first person ones, I was on a yacht and I didn't know that the prince was there. So a lot of times I'll have the AI do that. And for me, morally speaking, since that's a marketing mechanism rather than a creative mechanism, for me, I don't get upset about it. But I know some people are very no AI ever, but I don't know. I think for some, as a tool, I think it can be very helpful.
It's funny that authors used to romantically visit places, like go to a different continent because they wanted to soak up the atmosphere of the place where they were going to be setting the novel. Now I just put into YouTube this exact street in this exact season, and there's just someone with a phone walking down the street, and I can get every detail of the street that I need. So I don't know if we've lost a little bit of that romance. Strange. But good to have you with us as we go through the ins and outs of modern popular culture. The first thing I wanted to start off with was this. So the Oscars ratings were absolutely dreadful. And Greg, it's very easy to just sit into the narrative and say, woke Hollywood, they get what they deserve, they're disconnected and they're out of touch, and the mainstream public is pushing back. And to a degree, that's absolutely true. But it's also too clean and neat a narrative because there's other stuff going on. And I did the research. I looked at the most conservative things I could possibly find to look at their ratings. So I started off with NASCAR. And NASCAR's had its worst ratings in history last year. No one's tuning in to watch it. NBA, down about 5 to 10%. NHL, down about 5 to 10%. NFL, down about 5%. Super Bowl ratings, slightly down. The inauguration, lowest figures of the last three. State of the Union, also down. So everything's down across the board because we don't have communal experiences as society anymore. All that is kind of the idea of something which is a live event is therefore something that everyone communally shares in. It's become so broken and fragmented. So I posited the idea that, yeah, anti-woke, and yeah, the films weren't very good, and The Brutalist was 3.5 hours, and I enjoyed it, but I could understand how no one else would. And so it's a mixture of things, right?
Yeah, well, we talked about this with music a while back, that there, in my opinion, one of the reasons that music is having a hard time is because we have so much control over what, like I've been listening to the same pop punk playlist from 2003 forever. Like I'm never going to like, I'm always
that's one of the worst periods of music in history.
What's going on when I was in high school? Okay. So it is what it is. And I can get that over and over again. I don't have to wait for the radio. I don't have to go to a show and see how the show is going to be. I can pick all the things that I love and only focus on those things all the time. And I think that might be the same problem that's affecting live stuff is, well, I don't want to find out if Trump's going to say something wacky or whatever at the State of the Union, or I don't want to see what random thing they're going to do at the Oscars. I can pick and choose. For me personally, because I have a problem, I can just go to my watch later graveyard that has 400 videos in it, and I can just pick one of those that I said I was going to watch later anyway. So yeah, you can really customize what you want all the time, and you can watch it at whatever speed you want, and you just have all this control. And so I think the idea of watching a live event doesn't have as much charm anymore because it's unpredictable. You don't know if you're going to like it. You can't watch it at your convenience, and so you get into your little the playlist problem, I guess we could call it.
I thought there would be like a different part of society where the idea of live events would be quite cathartic and even affirming, because there's so many people who are isolated and lonely. Back in the 1970s, the average dude had 3 or 4 friends that he could count as, go over to people's house in the middle of the night to talk about your worries kind of friends. Now that's down to about 1 or even 0. And so the idea of live experiences ought to be something that masses of people can tune into because they feel that they're collectively part of something that's unfolding in real time, that they're sharing in. If it's sports events, it's political events, if it's entertainment events, something where they feel that, society is happening in real time has a kind of draw to it. But no, people just aren't interested. And the Grammy Awards down by about 10%. If you went out into the street, no one you asked randomly would be able to say, who won the Grammy for this or that. Because it doesn't have that heft or punch anymore. So, it's strange. But also, the Oscars just had a bunch of pretty average films. Can you imagine what it would have been like if Oppenheimer had been up this year? Like, it would have been such a joke in terms of like tiers of class. Would anyone even bother to have turned up? If you were any of the other contenders in any of those categories that Oppenheimer was in, who's going to win? Is it going to be Oppenheimer or that 3.5 film starring Adrian Brody? So,
I have to ask, Echo, what was your reaction when you saw that Alien Romulus was nominated for an Oscar?
I was unhappy. I'd almost forgotten about that film. I'd almost memory hold it, which would have been nice. But what was it up for? Some random.
It was up for it was up for visual effects. It may have been up for sound. I can't remember, but it was up for visual effects, and it did not win because Dune Part 2 won, because of course it did.
It was up for visual effects with what they did to Ian Holm.
Yeah.
They turned him into some horrific.
That was
thing
what I found so. Yeah, that was what I found so weird, because generally the film, I think the production value on Alien Romulus is generally very good, apart from that. And the fact that that is so bad, one would think that would disqualify it from being nominated. But I mean, the Oscars lost credibility a very long time ago. So,
well, that might be why they nominated and gave a lot of awards to what was really just a porn. They're trying to get people excited again. Come see Mickey Madison's boobs. We're going to give awards to that, and maybe people will watch again. I think that was maybe part of the motivation for all of that. We'll see next year, I guess.
What were your thoughts on Mickey Madison fallout with the idea of giving visibility to the sex worker community? What were your thoughts on that? Because there was a bit of a kerfuffle, and I could see it from both sides. And I don't think they were specifically saying this particular archetype or person who represents the sex worker. I think they're talking generally and more widespread, the idea of, young women who might have been abused, or they've fallen into it, or they were brought into it under dark and shady circumstances, or they got like a meth addiction, or they had trauma in their lives, and they fell into that as a lifestyle, and then things got worse. I think they're generally talking about that rather than the character in Anora, whereas a lot of people thought Anora is the person they're talking about in terms of giving visibility and a sense of empowerment to that community. By the way, I don't like community is used far too often these days, and anything is a community, and it annoys me. Like, as a member of the cycling community, I'm unhappy about the new bike.
You are a hive mind with other cyclists. You will have the same opinions.
And in the case of pros, I think it's rather a misnomer, because I don't I feel like most people would disagree that someone who's in the privacy of their bedroom and having an OnlyFans and don't actually physically interact with others is not the same as a streetwalker, for instance. It's not the same. But they try to be like, oh, I'm an SW, I'm a sex worker. It's like, girl, your life is not the same. Let us not pretend.
Yeah. So, Greg, where do you stand? Are you able to allow for a bit of nuance there, or do you take a conservative hardline?
I mean, it doesn't, like, the drawing attention to it or giving it a platform, that doesn't really bother me. It just, I haven't had a lot of time to write or even watch a lot of videos, but I'm still, since our Oscars discussion, and I did watch a few reviews of people with Anora from a few months ago, and people are praising this movie, and I have been genuinely trying to see this side of it, that there is this nuanced performance and it's this amazing film, and I don't see, I didn't even see in that movie they didn't really focus on Anora's life, so to me it didn't even feel like about the circumstances of sex work or whatever. To me, the movie was about a person. It was more about if you want to call it a societal expectation or whatever, but it was more about a girl who only knows to transact in sex. That's like the only way that she knows how to communicate affection. The end of the movie really hammers that home, that this guy is trying to treat her like a person and seeing her as, you know, a real human instead of an object. And she's like, oh, you make me feel seen. I'm going to do you because that's the only thing I know how to show appreciation with. And I thought that's more what they were looking at, not so much sex workers, but just sort of like the substance, where it's this mentality that people get, and you can blame society, or you know, there's all kind of ways to look at it. But I thought that's more of what Anora was about, just like the substance of how being viewed as an object makes you view yourself as an object after a certain time, and that's what Anora was doing. And I didn't get the whole subtleties of sex work and the lifestyle of sex work. None of that. That was all lost on me, apparently. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I was missing something too. Vex months ago in a stream was saying, we were talking about The Crow and how it gave off this weird vibe that screenwriters don't necessarily seem to know what love is. They seem to think that love is based on vibes, that if you vibe together, then that sort of constitutes love, which is a very strange way of looking at it. So yeah, strange lack of connection there, which is very odd. I don't know why it won. It's not a masterpiece of a film. No one's going to remember it in a couple of years.
No.
So any other thoughts on the Oscars? Who were you rooting for, Random?
Out of the Best Picture winners, Best Picture nominees, I can't remember if Dune Part 2 was up for it, but I did quite like Dune Part 2. Apart from that, I have to say The Substance, I found that very entertaining, and I'm glad that it won. Because it's honestly rare for movies like that to get that kind of recognition.
Yeah.
And part of it is probably because of the subject matter, but also part of it is because it is just so, it's cliche to say that it's a bold movie, quote unquote, but it says what it wants to say in such an exaggerated slap in the face, over the top manner, to where one moment it's like, yay, feminism, and then in the other moment it's like doing David Cronenberg body horror.
Exactly,
and somehow it works. That is one of the most entertaining films that I saw this year.
I went with Cronenberg as well. I'm glad that you got that same reference. Greg, let's touch on The Brutalist, because I thought it was great. I loved it, but I thought it was two very strange, different films. If it was just purely on a level of perception and connotation of this guy's life and fitting into America, almost documentary style, it was so immersive that there were long quarter-of-an-hour stretches where I had absolutely no issue whatsoever with the willful suspension of disbelief. I just felt I'm looking at 1950s America. I feel like I'm walking up these corridors and in these hallways. It's beautiful, transportive experience. So on that level, I thought it was an exquisite film. But then there also this other film of the actual narrative, which I thought was clunky, oftentimes contrived, trying to be ethereal or profound in some reason. And on that level of that actual narrative, I thought it floundered. So felt like I was watching two very different films enmeshed together, where I was incredibly enjoying one and confounded and exasperated by the other.
Yeah, I would even say maybe there's 3 or 4 films in there. There was just a bit going on, and it almost worked, like, I don't even think it was way too much going on, just a little bit for me. And I'm going to watch this one again. I'm actually, the more I thought about it, the more I just ruminated on it, and it really stuck with me, and I really enjoyed thinking about it, and I genuinely cannot wait to watch it again and like make a whole video about it. I really thought it was fantastic. For me, it was a really nuanced look between like capital and art, and unlike the traditional art good fuck capitalists, it was a very interesting person. It treated Adrian Brody's art almost like a drug, which at first I was like, why are we doing the heroin? Why the brothel in the beginning and all of it? And it was because he has this addictive personality, and he's just as addicted to architecture and art as he is to heroin and women and all of these other things. And so it represented it like an addiction, and it wasn't a good representation. Like art conquers all. It was like art kind of ruined his life a little bit. And for me, the thing that didn't really fit was his Jewishness. I thought that every now and then they were like, oh, and he's a Jew and he doesn't fit in. And I'm like,
yeah, it's supposed to be like a prevailing or presiding kind of atmosphere in the story. But you're right, it would just become incidental. And it was very kind of strange in that way. But some of the landscapes and scenes, like going into the into the marble mines or excavation sites, it almost became ethereal and beautiful to look at.
It was.
So it's a confounding film. I need to watch it again just for those reasons.
Yeah.
But before we move on, let's see. Well, my next guest, belated guest, has written 11 manifestos, 15 treatises, distributed 86 varieties of pamphlets, a baker's dozen encyclicals, and 4 or 5 rabble-rousing black books of his own, which can still be found resting tantalizingly and illicitly on park benches and in cafes all around Seoul, ready to fire the imagination and radical instincts of raw undergraduates. He is Despot of Antrim.
And Echo, I've got my greatest masterpiece. I've got it in my head, and I've got the pitch for you right now. Are you listening?
Go ahead.
All right. So Charlotte is a bourgeois young Dutch woman in her 20s, working as the manager at a hotel. She finds herself billeted with German soldiers after the Nazi conquest of Holland, and against her better judgment, she finds herself falling in love with a dashing German officer.
Wait, this is too original. I can't cope with all this originality. Stop.
Before she knows it, a young member of the resistance, a dashing but aggressive member of the resistance, accosts her and tells her that she must work with them. Now she has a choice, a dilemma. Does she continue the life of comfort, the easy way out with the German officer, or does she find herself in a spring romance with this dashing member of the resistance? What do you think? I think it could be big.
It's beautiful, but there's an essential question. Will she be facing away? That's the only thing that matters to me.
Well, that's if she's not facing away, I think we're going too far into breaking convention. Do you know what I mean? You don't want to be too innovative.
I suppose so. And will there be planes in the sky while she's looking at the Eiffel Tower?
Not planes in the sky. Otherwise, it's not going to be recognizable to a broad audience. Like, you can't be too original. You know what I mean? You don't want to blow people's minds.
Yeah. Well, I think you got the market sewn up with that. Let's do it. Sounds great. Any last thoughts on the Oscars?
Chris,
I didn't watch
The Substance. I'm actually interested in your thoughts on that one as a woman, because I'm sure we watch the movies very differently as men and women. What were your thoughts on that one?
I had to be persuaded to watch The Substance because I knew from watching YouTube reviews, I was like, all right, rah feminism, objectifying. I don't want to see it. But then a lot of my friends were like, no, you should watch it. And so just watching, especially the early scenes with Demi Moore and Dennis, I'm blanking on his last name, but just that smarmy, disgusting agent, and the way that they shot that, and the sound engineering was overtly traumatizing.
Oh, with the lobster and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh God, that was awful. But just like that movie is the first one in a very long time where you don't second screen that movie. You watch it and you pay attention to it, and you don't. And when you go to the bathroom, you pause it. So just for that alone. Because I'm not a filmmaker and I'm honestly not very visually inclined. But so if I notice something where it's like, this is a visceral experience. And the fact that for me, some people say it's not a horror movie. For me, it's a horror movie. I would have liked to have seen it win just because horror movies for me have been the most enjoyable of the past year. Like I feel like they don't get their due at the Oscars. And I feel if they want it to be a little bit more relevant, they would pay attention to what horror is doing, because I think it's doing good things. I think it's doing better things. And the fact that Toni Collette did not win for Hereditary was like, okay, we can just
it's an outrage.
Yeah, we could just be done with this for now, because they're just ridiculous. But yeah, I love the substance, and watching it as a woman. And I've never been a model, obviously. I've never been in Hollywood, but just hearing the Me Too stuff and knowing what goes on, you watch someone turn 35 and suddenly they turn into a pillow face. It just represented that so visually. And, I loved it. It was just really great.
It seemed to contain everything within it, so you could read it from any perspective, and sometimes clashing and overlapping at the same time. You could read it as there's elements of narcissism in there. There's also marginalization. You could read it as a primal scream. You could also read it as heavily irony and in control. And so you can read it from all these different perspectives. And so that's why I thought it was a blast. It's a good question. Should I watch it again? No, I think I'm just going to watch it just that once, because that's how it ought to be taken.
Yeah, I don't think I would rewatch it. And Anora was one of those where I was like, would I rather see it, or would I rather watch the YouTube with spoilers? And for me, with her Anora, I just watched the spoiler reviews, because I was like, I don't want to see it, because they kept saying, well, this is what Pretty Woman should have been. You talked about whether they real look at sex workers. And it's like, only if you look through okay, here's what Pretty Woman wasn't, so here's what Anora is. It was a very limited scope, and I didn't really need to watch it. I just watched the spoilers.
Despot, I feel that in somewhere deep in my bones, you might have some sort of acerbic take about Anora. Just an instinct I have.
Acerbic. It's the sad reality of Anora is that it's a forgettable drama. It is good. It's good and it's funny, and there are things to like about it. But I'm never going to watch it again. Like, I don't want to watch it again. Not because I'm disgusted by, the sex scenes or anything. They're sex scenes, whatever. You've seen a million of them. It's just that it's not that good. And I don't think there's anything to go back for. The characters aren't particularly interesting or profound. The movie doesn't have much to say, I don't think, beyond the, people's behavior is informed by their socioeconomic background, and their perception of reality is informed by that. And it also touches on prostitution, but again, nothing very profound or interesting. It's just it's good, and that's it. I certainly don't think it deserved to win an Oscar. I think it should have been June, The Substance, or Wicked. But that's it. I really don't have anything much to say about it, because I don't think it's a particularly interesting or profound piece of work.
Was there anything artistic about it?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that it touched the way that it depicts how people from different backgrounds just have a completely different understanding of life, and how even to the extent that they view people differently. So the rich Russian kid just views people as basically tools, and even his parents would view them as tools as well, because everyone is a tool. So human beings reduced to tools is a theme in that movie. So Anora is holes for men to fuck and a pair of tits to look at. So she's just a tool of sexual gratification. But at the same time, she's a green card for the Russian kid, and just basically a party toy for him. But then the Russian kid for her is her way out. That's her billionaire husband. She's going to be able to use him to escape from this life of prostitution, and actually just be able to have something of a decent life without having to shove her ass in men's faces 6 days a week. And then it goes beyond that. There's these group of thugs that are sent after Anora, and they're, again, just men who are used as muscle. So that's a major theme in it, and I quite like that. I think that's an interesting theme that's been overlooked. But
people
yeah, good movie.
To moving parts. People reduced to moving parts and social processes.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought that was quite well done. It's quite a well-paced movie, although there are a couple of scenes that maybe go on a little bit too long. But yeah, it's good. It's a good movie. Nothing spectacular.
What's interesting about, you said, like, you've seen a sex scene, you've seen them all. It's kind of weird that we're at a spot where that's so saturated that those don't, like, in that movie, it's just like, oh, okay, whatever, she's naked. The parts of The Substance that were not shocking were when Demi Moore is standing in front of the mirror naked, and then I can't remember the other actress's name. She's standing there as well. And the comparison, obviously you see the comparison, but that's not the shocking part. That doesn't really drive the message of the movie home. With The Brutalist, there is nudity, but it's just, I don't know, it doesn't even feel useful. But then the scene in the marble mine, There's no nudity in that scene.
Mhm.
And it's just sound design of a belt buckle, and it is the
Yeah.
most horrific, impactful moment because it actually, there's build up to it. It means something. And I think that's very interesting this year, that there was a lot of nudity in the Oscars and they were all very passe. And then this non-nude scene was so much stronger. And I think it's more creative that way.
Yeah, I mean, actual nakedness with a director, it can actually be quite banal, and if done in certain ways. But yeah, if sex is like is thematic and part of an unfolding scene, or has some kind of a power relation to it, then that's where it becomes charged. But yeah, like Demi Moore in front of the mirror, I don't think anyone got the jollies from that. It was actually quite almost deliberately banal, and part of the characters. So there's like ironies to it, which makes it, sort of interesting to watch in that sense.
Yeah.
So that was the Oscars. So anyone got some thoughts on this?
I've seen it. Who's seen this?
I haven't had a chance.
I'm watching it later this week.
All right. Kristin, you start. Go ahead.
I am going to have to go against Drinker. I love this. I loved it. With one notable exception. And I'm going to say it. I think Ruffalo called an audible on his Trump imitation. I don't think that was the intention of the script. I think because, especially if you look at the way Toni Collette, this was supposed to be a mega church, Joel Osteen-esque pastor and his over-controlling wife. And then Ruffalo called an audible. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do Trump because that's really of the moment. That's what I'm going to do. And it didn't fit. And it was so wrong because he should have been Joel Osteen with big ass teeth. That's who he was supposed to be. And then starting to believe that he was God instead of the, God he was worshiping, which of course, he wasn't. He's all about showbiz. Other than Ruffalo, and it was a little long, a little bloated. I actually loved it. Although, why was Stephen Ewan there? Love him. Why was his character there? I feel like we could have left him on Earth, perhaps in pieces. But I overall, I thought the movie really worked. And the message wasn't to beat you over the head with.
Well, Despot.
This is a dreadful movie. So I'll agree with Kristin that the worst thing about it is Mark Ruffalo. And other than that, the acting performances are very good. So, I mean, Bong Joon-ho he's a patchy director. I don't like him. I think that The Parasite is badly overrated, but he is very good in certain aspects. He's good at cinematography and he's good at actor direction. He gets some brilliant performances out of actors. So he's not all bad. He can do certain things very well, but what he can't do is write. He is a bad writer. And if he were to work with a really good professional writer, he could make great movies, but he can't. He's just not good at writing. So I'll give you some examples. This movie is about a group of colonists who get on a spaceship and they go to this very far off planet. It takes them years to get there. And then when they arrive on the planet, they park their ship on a big ice plateau. Now that makes no sense. You wouldn't do that. You would park it near a river, or you would park it at the very least next to the ocean where you can do some fishing or something. They park, or a forest, just somewhere with resources. They literally park it in a gigantic ice plateau. My guess is because the CGI was cheaper. That's the cheapest, a big flat plane. Now, that doesn't make any sense. There's tons of other stuff. For example, Mickey 17 comes out of a printer, a sort of meat printer that prints clones, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, a major part of the world build is food insufficiency. So there are food shortages. People have to eat this kind of slop food and this dark brown bread because they don't have good food and it's a real problem. But and people are punished with food rationing, like they'll put on half rations. But if you have this machine that can literally print human beings, why don't you just print food? Why don't you print meat? Why don't you print steaks? Why don't you print pigs and then slaughter them? It doesn't make any sense. They would have, if that technology existed, they would be printing food all day. They'd have a factory dedicated to it and people would be able to eat like kings. And also there's zero indication of how Mickey is printed. Like, where does the material for his body come from? It literally seems to be fabricated out of nothing. So if that technology exists, you should be able to fabricate food out of nothing. There's other stuff as well. This idea that these aliens are able to communicate and they don't eat humans, but no one realizes this. It doesn't work. This would have been found out very quickly by any sort of scientific expedition. In addition, when Mickey is presumed dead, everyone just thinks he's dead, and yeah, okay, he's dead, whatever. But wouldn't they have known that he was alive by following the tracker? And if he didn't have a tracker on him, how did his friend Stephen Yeun find him in the first place in the middle of a snowstorm? It's full of plot holes. That's just off the top of my head. There's tons of other. Here's another one. That there's this Russian gang that Stephen Yeun and what's his name, the guy who plays Mickey, Robert Pattinson. They borrow money from a loan shark, and then the loan shark goes after them, and that's why they have to get on this spaceship and get the hell off Earth, because they don't want to get killed by the loan shark. So the loan shark sends a guy after them, but the guy waits like 4 years to actually pursue the debt. It doesn't make any sense. Why would you wait 4 years? And then there's other things. I could go on with the plot holes, but it's a complete mess. The first third of the movie is very exposition heavy and it has a massive over-reliance on voiceover narration. Now, voiceover narration very rarely works, and this movie is a perfect demonstration of why it doesn't work, because the voiceover narration simply isn't needed a lot of the time. You know exactly what's going on screen, but in addition to that, you also have a voiceover narration telling you what's happening. It's almost like the infantilization of the audience. Like, I know, I can see, I don't need this voiceover narration. The first third of the movie is essentially a preamble to the inciting event, which is the death of Mickey 16. And they didn't need to do that. They could have just scrapped all that and gone straight from the inciting incident, do a little bit of character introduction, inciting incident, and then get on with it. But they dragged it down with all this this preamble and the voiceover narration, which was dreadful. There's a love triangle that goes absolutely nowhere. Mark Ruffalo, he did a bad job with the acting, but the character is one-dimensional. It's an appallingly written character. And his wife, too, again, a one-dimensional kind of villainess type. Just, there's nothing there. It's a paper-thin character. The character of Mickey himself is quite good. He's maybe the best thing about it. I also did like Stephen Yeun. I thought he was a good character. And Stephen Yeun's great. And I love Stephen Yeun. I think he's a great actor. Has anybody seen Beef? Anybody seen that show?
No, that's... What is that?
I got through the first episode, but I hated the characters so much. It was really well written, but I hated them, so I had to stop watching it.
I know what you're getting at, but that's also kind of why that was a big difference between me and Greg. Greg hates Anora, and I like it, but it's because I embrace my hatred of the characters. I don't like any of the characters. I hate them. I hate Anora. I hate the Russian kid. I hate them all. I hate every character in that movie, but I like that. I like that I can sit there and watch a movie where I hate everybody. It's refreshing.
Wow. So your interaction with the culture now is principally hate watching.
No, I enjoy it. I'm not hate watching. I enjoy the movie, and I like the fact that it's a movie about people that you hate. I mean, why do you think the Nazis sell so well in popular literature or in movies? You know what I mean? Everybody loves a good villain. So yeah, there's other things that are bad about the movie. There's a scene, for example, where Mickey goes in and is fed an experimental steak by Mark Ruffalo because he's a guinea pig. He's an expendable clone. And it comes out of nowhere. It doesn't have any build-up and it doesn't have any payoff. It's just there so that Bong Joon-ho can kind of gross out the audience. Mm-hmm. It's a mess. It's a mess, and it's a dreadful movie.
I thought Parasite was fantastic, but he made one of those films, which is one of those, has everyone been taken over by intergalactic creatures who have wormed their way into their brain and collectively ruptured their minds films, which is the one where it's the train.
Snowpiercer.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's a stupid movie. I hate that film. I don't know why anyone thinks it's a masterpiece. I don't know why anyone thinks it's gripping. It's so stupid.
The thing with Parasite is it heavily relies on characters being unbelievably stupid in order for the plot to happen. So, for example, the mother, she just starts hiring people on the basis of based on the word of this maid that she hired, or this teacher she hired 2 days ago. That's not how things are done in Korea. I don't think that's how things are done anywhere, but especially by rich families. They use vetting agencies. Vetting is, especially in Korea, vetting is very professionalized. There are agencies which exist solely for the purpose of vetting, and rich clients use them to vet employees. Even marriage agencies are very popular here. They used to call them matchmakers in the West. They don't exist anymore in the West, but in Korea, they're very popular. And the reason is because of the vetting. They're really good at it. You basically go to this marriage matchmaker. I mean, I have relatives-in-law who were matched through these agencies, and they will, I mean, these guys will know what the inside of your toilet seat looks like. They find out everything about you, and then they match you based on your life experience and your history and your socioeconomic status, everything. And they generally always get it right. They're really good. So vetting is massive here. The idea that a rich family would bring a group of strangers in to work with their kids without extensive vetting is just ludicrous. I mean, it's nonsense. And there's other nonsense in that movie as well. But Mickey 17, I think, is where Bong Joon-ho is exposed. This movie is going to expose him as a bit of a hack, I think.
Kristin, would you say Despot's maybe missing a little thing just on Bong's aesthetic is not meant to be exact realism? It's supposed to have a kind of free-floating spirit and atmosphere to it where you can kind of dispense with all the specifics and try and go for the themes and the visual aesthetics.
Yeah, I think you do a disservice by treating Mickey 17 like it's hard sci-fi, because your head's going to explode if you try to think of the physics of it. I mean, it's ridiculous, like you said. I took it more as a dark comedy, and of course, because it's who he is, it's a commentary. I specifically the Pax Americana, we will make this ice world our own. I can't wait to gas the native inhabitants. Like, he's really excited about it, and I don't know if that was a paper thin issue, but more of a this is what you are, kind of a condemnation versus a paper thin. And if Ruffalo had just done his job correctly, I think it would have come through more clearly.
No, I got the themes of colonization and sort of using people as disposable tools that are there to serve the system. But that's the problem with Bong Joon-ho. He's massively preoccupied with his themes. It was the same thing in Parasite, class difference, lying to get ahead, things like that. And, of course, the sort of how everyone parasitizes each other for their own ends. These are his themes, and he forefronts his themes, and he leaves. There's nothing wrong with being very heavy on themes, but I think if you leave plot and characterization behind, if you're not paying attention to that, the movie is simply going to suffer. I mean, some people will like Mickey 17. It's certainly, not going to be the worst movie of the year. It's not going to be in the bottom 5, but it is a bad movie. But some people will like it, but it's too. And this is my problem with Bong Joon-ho. He goes way too heavy for themes, to the expense of most of the rest of the movie, except cinematography. He's really good at that, and acting. But those are the three things he does well: are theme, cinematography, and acting. And as far as I can tell, all other aspects of the filmmaking, certainly in Mickey 17, are pretty bad. So they range from just mediocre to dreadful.
Greg, my feeling with Parasite is that you can have something which is grounded in a socio-cultural context, and it can also be hyper-realized at the same time. And that's why I think people like Bong's direction, because he can manage those two things at the same time and have them interestingly overlap and coincide with each other in interesting ways. That becomes kind of an aesthetic while you're exploring the themes.
And that's what I've heard about it. I have not seen his stuff, and I didn't realize that Snowpiercer was his and apparently has all these themes. I remember hearing about that and just thinking, oh, okay, it's Chris Evans and a train going through the snow, whatever. Like, I never watched it. Now I'm kind of interested. What I'm hearing about this movie is that it falls into a new genre that I'm going to start calling bad thing bad, where capitalism or colonization bad thing is bad. And it used to be, they're not so much anymore, but it was, for a long time, it was race movies. Racism is bad. And that's what a lot of the movies were. Crash, racism is bad. Blindside, racism is bad. And Anora, treating people like objects is bad. Bad thing is bad. And so this movie sounds a lot like, it sounds like they went for some cool things, but what I'm hearing from everybody is they tried to do too much, and they lean too heavily into, look, colonizing an innocent species is bad. And well, yeah, we get that. Like, we saw Avatar, we know. And that's what it feels like. But I haven't seen it, so I have to reserve full judgment.
Has there ever been, or are there ever really any moments when a director does something brilliant which captures the zeitgeist, and then the studio says, okay, you've got a blank check to do whatever you want next? Like 99% of the time, that always ends up terrible, right?
I was actually having that thought, because this is going to be a blow, because this is done really quite badly in the United States, where it needed to do well. It basically flopped, and I don't think the international box office can save it at this stage. So this is going to be a pretty hard flop, and it'll be a blow to Bong Joon-ho's career, because this was the sort of go big or go home movie. And now he's got to go home. He's got to go back to Korea and start doing indie movies again, because he has basically failed to break the American market with this. And you're right, Echo. That's happened so much when a director is really hot, gets a big budget. Patty Jenkins, that was another example. So Patty Jenkins was allegedly directed Wonder Woman, but I've also heard that it was shadow directed by what was it? Zack Snyder. Who shadow directed that?
Can't remember.
But
Not
it was
sure.
somebody else. Who?
I'm not sure. I'll have a look and see if I can find it. But
I've heard that it was basically shadow directed by someone else, but they put her name on it because, DEI and all the rest of it. And then they gave her a big budget because she was hot. I think even Kathleen Kennedy, that was one of Kathleen Kennedy's many failed projects, was to have her direct some sort of, I think it was Rogue Squadron. And she made Wonder Woman 1984, and we all know what happened with that. And then Todd Phillips got a huge budget for Joker 2, and we know what happened with that. Those are just some examples off the top of my head. But when direct... Oh, here's another one. Ang Lee, after his great masterpiece, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Oh, remember The Ice Storm? That was a beautiful film.
No, I haven't seen The Ice Storm, but Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, just one of the great movies. And he was shit hot after that movie, especially when The Matrix came out as well. People wanted that style of movie making, so Hollywood gave him a big budget to make the Hulk. And so that's another example. Happens all the time, you're right.
The hubris comes out.
That always comes to mind for me is Duncan Jones. He made Moon in 2009, which is one of my favorite science fiction movies. He made Source Code, which is decent enough, but nowhere near as good as Moon.
Interesting film, that film.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and it clearly has like a vision behind it. But then after that, he made the Warcraft movie, which I don't like. I like Warcraft, and I don't hate the movie, but Jesus Christ, it's like a massive budget box office extravaganza, which is not at all what his first two were. So it seems like they were just like, hey, Duncan Jones, you do the movies. We'll give you a lot of money to make the Warcraft movie. And as far as I'm aware, it didn't do very well. So, yeah.
Oh, well, the French director who made some pretty classy thrillers, and then they let him off the chain to make Emilia Perez, and of course that didn't end up exactly well. Anyway, anyone seen the trailer for this season 2?
Just one trailer was released, right?
Oh, yeah, boy, has it whet my appetite. It just looks good, and I'll explain why. I just took screenshots from the trailer, and not the action scenes, but just because in the set designs and costumes and creation of the world, people care. I mean,
it's so deliberate.
Yeah, look at this. This looks like it's not a green screen. It looks like an actual huge interior. Don't you just want to climb those steps up into that ship and take off? It looks like people care. It's glossy. It's glinting. It's got a sheen to it. It looks proportionate. It looks lived in. It looks lovely. And even just this room, just look at the aesthetic of the curtains, the windows, the art, the shadowing, the lighting, the props. It looks like people care to create an aesthetic of a world that looks lived in, it looks familiar, but it also could be science fiction in a galaxy far, far away. It just looks good. It just looks, I just want to be in this world. I want to be in these interiors. It just looks classy. And there, what are these huge agricultural things? Your mind wants to speculate and dwell on them and get into that world. Is that actual wheat or not? And how does this agricultural system work? It just looks lived in. It looks like people living hard scrabble lives, but also in a totally different foreign alien environment. And just look at this interior, like glossy, wet, sheen to it. It looks familiar, but also totally unfamiliar. It just looks classy. So those are the screenshots that I took. I'm just really looking forward to it because I think it's going to be that one tiny, minuscule little snack biscuit that Disney's given me of Star Wars, which I can actually like. In a real world, they'd replace Kathleen Kennedy with Tony Gilroy, and we could all dance in the street. It's never going to happen, but we could think how nice that would be. But they just got the aesthetic right out of the 10% of Disney slop garbage content from the studio that bought you the lesbian space witches. Also brings you this.
Sorry, the snack biscuit reminded me of Mandalorian season 3, where they did the whole snack biscuit rescue thing to earn the trust of the guy just to wipe his mind, that then went nowhere. You took me back to a terrible show.
Yeah,
I made Greg watch that. I remember I asked you to watch that for our first stream, and you watched the whole thing, and I couldn't even watch the whole thing. I gave up.
I came
God.
There are
prepared.
2 seasons of The Mandalorian. I will accept nothing else.
Amen.
But even The Mandalorian, doesn't that kind of in retrospect kind of look and feel a bit shaky? Like we were all so desperately hanging out for anything that could be good. And they just, it's like the first person that smiled at you when you were down and out and feeling terrible about yourself. And one person smiles at you and you fall in love with them. That's what The Mandalorian was for the first season. In
Yeah,
retrospect, I don't think it holds up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Random.
Go for it. Oh, well, yeah, I'll be quick. So the with The Mandalorian, I think that at the time when it came out and basically until Andor came out, it was kind of held up as like, okay, Disney, you've actually done it. You've created decent Star Wars content because it was ticking the boxes, and at a glance, it seemed to be what people actually thought that they wanted in a way that like the films were not. Because I forget when The Mandalorian started, but I believe it came out after The Last Jedi, so people were already pissed off with Star Wars by that point. Whereas, yeah, with Andor, it has a kind of respect around it that The Mandalorian does not. Like the criticism that I hear of Andor is it's boring. People fall asleep while watching it, and whereas if you look at like criticism of Mandalorian, it's far more substantive. And I actually don't think I have heard a single person say anything good about season 3 of The Mandalorian, even amongst people who have seen it and who like it. Because I stopped after season 2 because I was just done. Because in particular, season 2 of The Mandalorian seemed to be primarily concerned with linking in and setting up different TV shows, and kind of doing the Marvel thing. And I guess what Arcane season 2 ended up doing as well. Whereas Andor is only really connected to Rogue One. And that's probably the thing that I'm most interested to see, is because I am not really a fan of Rogue One. I saw it once. I think it is okay. And I'm wondering how good Andor is, if the season 2 is as good as season 1. Is that going to make Rogue One better in retrospect?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. It's sometimes you have a creeping feeling you can never quite quell. It kind of nags at you that you're willing something to be better than it is because you want it to be. Like maybe a band that you really love, and then they put out an album, and you know in your bones that it's not actually very good, but you love this band and you have a loyalty to it, so you kind of will yourself into trying to enjoy the songs more than they're actually worth. And I think that's kind of what happened with Rogue One.
Yeah, Mandalorian season 2 is just downright bad, especially when they took some TV episodes that they'd filmed for Boba Fett and just shoved them in there, I think, or something like that.
I think
to
they
finish the season.
Plucked a couple and gave him Boba Fett, wasn't it? Because they needed.
Oh no, yeah, that's it. That's right. I'm
Yeah.
confused. There's been so much bloody slop. I just get confused now.
It was bad.
But Mando season 1, yeah, I agree, Echo. I mean, we're going to be doing a segment a little later in the stream talking about movies that have aged badly and they get worse on a rewatch. And I suspect that even Mando fans, if they were to watch season 1 again, they would think, really? Like people went mad for this? This is just okay.
Yeah. Just go through some things here. Oh yeah. This is so Despot, you got me onto this, and I'm so glad that you did. I've never understood Meghan Markle bashing. I never got it until now, because I actually watched a couple of episodes of her show.
I watched one. Greg, did you watch it?
No, I haven't.
Greg, for Christ's sake!
Greg, you had one task.
Me and Echo go over the top, and you fucking leave us in the lurch, hanging your ass out in the trench while we're taking the bullets. What the fuck, Greg?
Come on, man. Bruh. So this was laugh out loud funny to me. This was hilarious. Hysterical. It's got an aesthetic.
I conjured this. I'm definitely going to do a sketch on this. So I imagined that it's a giant compound, like an armed compound surrounded by walls, and that Meghan Markle has people kidnapped and brought in there and forced to cook with her all day. And if they try to escape, one of the guards shoots them.
They do look like they're under duress at times. Yeah, they're so wide-eyed.
Kathy Bates from
Misery.
Misery.
Misery. It was brilliant.
I heard some
Yeah.
audio about somebody asking her a question about Meghan Markle, and she interrupts and says it's Meghan Sussex. Is that what this is from?
Yes.
That was.
So that was Mindy Kaling, who is
God.
insufferable
yeah.
herself. We hate
I thought
her.
that was a joke.
Oh my God. And so I spent 3 whole years in Great Britain as a little girl, and I know how last names work. And Meghan Markle just interrupts her. It's like, oh, well, actually, I'm so sorry, but you know that my last name is Sussex now. And I'm like hollering at the TV. No, ma'am. No, it's not. And neither are your kids. What are you talking about? And then she goes off on this thing. I wasn't expecting it to just be so touching that I have the same last name as my children, but you don't. You don't. They're Mountbatten Windsor, and you know who's not? You. Oh my God, this girl. And is that something you didn't know would touch you, or did you think you would not have the same last name as your children? You reprobate. Oh, she's awful. Yeah, and I agree with you, Despot. It seemed like they were all there under duress, especially her poor makeup artist. Oh my God.
Oh yeah, we're going to get into him in a second, but the aesthetic, the tone I came up with is it's a kind of serene flakiness that pervades the whole thing. It's wonderful.
Like she starts the show by saying, "Oh, my friend is coming, and we've been friends forever, and I can't wait till he gets here. I'm going to make sure everything's so right for him to show how much I care." Right. So, and then her friend comes, and I thought, okay, well, my idea of visiting a friend. Let's say I was to visit Echo, right? I go to New Zealand, and if I go to Echo's, my idea is, right, we're going to sit and drink and have a bit of lad banter and take it easy. I don't expect him to force me to cook with him in a kitchen for 6 hours straight.
And to make candles. Let's make candles together, Despot.
Yeah, let's
make beeswax candles, and we're going to what else are we going to do?
Bath salts that might melt your skin.
Yeah,
off.
bath salts. Yeah,
we're going to make candles. We're going to do bath salts. We're going to make a pie. We're going to make a cake. We're going to make spaghetti. We're going to make dessert. I felt so sorry for the poor guy. Like,
I know
he's sitting there. And he's probably thinking, "Oh Jesus, when is this going to stop? When can I get out of here?" But it's just after activity after activity after activity.
Yeah, I know.
Poor guy.
He's off the plane. He's jet lagged, and he's got to sit through this. So, Greg, I've got some little highlights for you. Okay, so hopefully I don't get too demonetized. But Greg, my essential question to you: you're a busy man. You've got tons of things vying for your attention and entertainment. How high up in the hierarchy of things that you need to watch is Meghan Markle chopping vegetables and making crudité?
I mean, now that I've heard about it, it's like I want to quit this stream and go watch it immediately. Like it's right.
Well,
I need to see this.
Get ready, because this is going to be compelling and visceral content. Are you ready? Okay, here we go. Let's see if I can get this going. There she is.
The stick. Tiny details.
So there. So she's putting little daisies in the. Hey, how exciting and compelling is that?
It's amazing.
All right.
Well, I mean, she seems like a real professional to me.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
You're so sweet. I wanted to make it colorful and joyful for you.
Colorful and joyful for her.
Those are celery sticks, you cheap bitch. You can't give quality vegetables to your guests.
No, this isn't celery sticks. This is something special.
Put peanut butter and raisins on there and make Anthem a log. What are you doing?
Yes.
Yeah, but look at this. She explains that it's not perfect.
Little details at the end that make, I mean, this is imperfect, but it doesn't need to be perfect. It's just.
It looks pretty perfect.
Yeah, so that's
to me. It's dry as a bone.
So that's like the first quarter is her chopping vegetables, make crudité, while this guy lavishly pours praise on her for her culinary skills, with jaunty music in the background, sort of pseudo, what's that 60s type of
Yeah, the music in this is bizarre. It ranges from sort of horribly cliched bossa nova to cocktail lounge slop. And it's random. It comes in at the most random moments. Like she's taking some shit out of the fridge to chop it up, and then a jaunty little jazz number comes on. It's just
pseudo Motown.
Curling.
Yeah, and it's all just filler, because it's like 5 seconds or 10 seconds of focusing on a coffee plunger, just because they're desperately trying to fill in time. So, Greg, you've been blown away by that, but her culinary skills go even further. Are you ready? Here we go.
Why doesn't anyone ever present peas like this?
That's the question I've wanted to know.
Green pearls.
Well, that's sweet.
So why doesn't anyone present peas like this, like green pearls, Greg?
But they look like peas. What am I missing?
Boiled potatoes. That's what this man is trying to say. He doesn't know what else to do.
But then the next phase, and this, I was actually howling with laughter when I watched this next phase because she makes pasta, and the pasta is literally looks like something that in a student flat, if you have whatever's left in the larder that you chuck in together just to fill your stomach, like little tomatoes, pasta, and like some kegel or whatever. And she treats this like it's a sensational experience. I was laughing my ass off. It's
Green
brilliant.
pearls.
Green pearls.
Green pearls, girls. So you see how it's just cooked in that.
Wow!
It's the noodle is the right.
Whoa, it's so amazing. Look at that.
Greens going in at the end. Liquid used to bubble.
Oh my
So
God,
bored.
she's a genius. Look at that.
Oh, and Greg,
seen
you'll love
anything.
this because I know you got kids. She says that she puts some aside and sends it with her toddler children to school.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, the teachers are gonna love that saucy noodle dish.
So much.
Because that sounds like a disaster.
Vegetarians, yeah, that's what kids want. They want spaghetti with no meat. Yeah, they love
Yeah.
that vegetarian spaghetti. Jesus, it's child abuse.
I saw that
that's
as like
a
a
student-
punishment because I'm from
Yeah.
the Midwest, and Greg, we are the land of no flavor and no seasoning, and that's how we like it very much.
right.
But that looks, I wouldn't eat that. It's disgusting.
Put some cream cheese in there, baby. That's
Exactly.
how you
Some Fritos, something.
Just to look at it,
some ranch powder.
I don't even think it's salvageable. Like I've gotten
Yeah.
quite a bit of experience with cooking. You know, my wife does a ton of cooking. I used to cook a lot when I was single, and that isn't salvageable. Like I might think, okay,
No.
look, can I maybe get some ground beef and fry it up in a pan and then add it? But I would just if I was looking at that, I would literally just throw it out and start again. It just looks
Yeah.
horrible.
It's watery gloop that she's passing off as like some sort of a lovely, charming meal. And then they
It
make
looks like some
candles
kind
together.
of broth. And
Yeah.
I can't tell if it's meant to be that or if it's meant to be like a more traditional like pasta type thing. Like
Yeah.
I can barely cook, and I could do a better job than that.
Hmm. Yeah. And then they make candles together from beeswax candles, which takes up more of this poor guy's time. And then, Greg, I want you to picture the most bland, boring, generic cake you can possibly do. Can you picture that in your mind?
I think so.
Okay. And then we're going to listen to this guy's reaction to what is clearly the most bland, boring cake imaginable. Oh no, I went back to the beginning. Damn, back to the crudité.
details.
To move
Girls.
forward. Yeah.
So you see how it's just
So we get to watch
cooked
the
in that.
pasta
Now that we've
again.
taken the lid off a lot of this
Delightful.
moisture. Until the noodle is
That
the
looks
right
like just
texture that you
tomatoes
want, al
in-
dente.
That's
You see
just
the
tomatoes
grains
and
going in
chicken
the
broth with some
liquid.
spinach.
Used to bubble.
Yeah. Okay, well, here comes the cake. This is the grand finale.
God.
Ta-da!
Oh yeah.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Oh yeah. Look at that
It's so
crumble.
obnoxious because
called-
she's talking to him like a fifth grader. Like,
Little
no,
rich
it doesn't
girl.
look like much on the outside, but on the inside, it's beautiful. I'm like, I hate you, Meghan Markle. If I did not before now, I do now.
But he's
Because
breathless. He says, I'm so excited.
I can just imagine. I'm just picturing a guy off camera with a gun pointed at his head at all times. Like, read
Yeah.
the script,
like it.
say the line.
Yeah,
And then at
someone
the
needs to
end-
give that man an Oscar.
Yeah. At the end, they go out and they sit out in a deck overlooking California.
Do they
And
put
it's
a fork in
exquisite.
that? I want to see how dry that is.
Yeah. And then
Right.
they're sitting out together and there's 10 seconds of silence. And then the guy he goes, oh my God, shut up. When he takes his first mouthful. it's prime content. And then he says, thank you so much for inviting me. And I got the sense that they're not actually best friends. She needed someone that she could bring over for the episode to have on and then talk him up as like some, like a loved friend from yesteryear.
Oh,
And the
they're
whole
definitely
show is
talking
like that.
Yeah, they talked about him going to her cake tasting for
Yeah.
her wedding, but he did not go to the wedding. So they're not friends. Like, he is the help.
Yeah.
Kristin, did you notice? I read this, but I was so shocked by how bad this was that I forgot to pay attention. I heard that her hairstyle changes 4 or 5 times in the course of a single morning. I read that somewhere.
That might be true. All I remember of her hair was that like she bent over and like her hair was like dragging in the food on one of the episodes. I'm like, girl, what are you doing? Wear it up. Oh, it was awful.
The
So-
other
so-
thing as well, if you just pay attention in these clips to this, because this is something that I noticed. Everything is brand new. It's so fake. It's one of the fakest shows I've ever seen. So the house itself was rented, right?
Yeah.
And then her people, her crew, the Netflix crew, production designer, went and bought all this new shit, and it is pristine. It is completely unused. Like, look at the chopping board. It's very easy to tell if a chopping board is used because it's covered in lines and stains. Like my chopping board, actually, we should probably throw those out. Anyway, they're a mess. And the chopping boards here are just perfectly smooth wood. They have literally never been used, ever. Everything in that kitchen has never been used. It is pristine. The walls are pristine. This kitchen has never been used before, and she's sitting there talking about how much of a trad wife she is. It's so fake.
What you're missing out on, Greg, though, is that it creates its own simmering atmosphere of satire where you're just giggling and laughing the whole way through. So you need to spend the whole hour watching it to get this infantilizing flakiness of constant echoing affirmation. Oh my God, that's so good. I know, right? Yeah, it is. It's so good. I know. It's just constant, banal that for an hour. And after a while, I was laughing out loud and just I thought I was going to fucking die and have a heart attack because it's so funny.
It reminds me of an actual TikTok channel that is a satire of trad wives. It's so good. It's hard to tell if it's real or not. And that's the best kind of satire. And I'm trying to get my wife to come in here because she's texting me a stream of consciousness about what a try-hard Meghan is and how what a piece of shit she is.
I feel your wife is the presiding saint of our streams.
She is. She said she obviously saw Blake Lively and Martha Stewart post prison and was like, damn, they know how to make a comeback. So if on the show she gets like a rapper best friend, you'll know what happened. She's just following in the footsteps.
If they brought 50 Cent on that show, I would watch religiously. That would be hilarious.
I heard from Ryan Kinnell's channel today that this was cancelled, so Netflix are done with it.
Damn.
No, I've heard that they got a season 2, and
I've heard both.
Like,
I'm just saying that's what Ryan Kinnell's channel was saying. He's reported that it's been cancelled by Netflix, but who knows?
Yeah, it's so anathema to my way of comporting myself and understanding the world. I don't want to live in a medium of glowing, serene, doing nice activities. I need to be.
By the way, before I forget, Greg, you owe us a bad watch. All right.
Yeah.
We're gonna assign you. We're going to assign you, because you betrayed us on this, you left us in the lurch. We're going to assign you like the worst shit we can think of, and you have to watch it and come on stream and talk about it, and we're not going to watch it.
That's right. Okay. Just a quick little thought. You know that show, The Gentleman, from last year? The Guy Ritchie thing? Mm-hmm. Make that guy Bond. Surely that guy, make him the Bond, right?
Yes. Everything he is in my watch.
He's just turned 40.
I mean...
Yeah. I think that's a safe option. It's the best thing for Amazon to do now is just play it safe. Make him Bond. That'd be good.
He was great as a Dauntless. That guy was fantastic.
The Gentleman had like its Guy Ritchie so it had the satirical self-awareness kind of irony in there. So he can do that. And you can also do the suave leading man. Seems like a good option. As long as it's not.
And he can do comedy.
Yeah, exactly.
Which Bond really needs after the last Bond.
That's right. Okie doke. We'll move on. I'm going to leave that behind so Despot can handle that. The publishing industry. So here's just some snaps from the 1980s where it was full of literary lions, where the Booker Prize was a battlefield that people would contest. Authors had a panache to them, an allure to them. It was exciting. And head of these literary soirees, and they were displacing the ancien regime, coming up with exciting and new stories. And then into the 90s, books like Trainspotting or Fight Club that people would read in the pub, or as an undergraduate, it would be super cool to be seen reading these works because they're gritty and boundary pushing. And the contemporary literary scene has kind of lost a lot of this panache and excitement, in my view. So, Despot, if you're there, I want to run past some current titles. This is from the booksellers list that literary agencies have out trying to get into publishing houses. So a couple. Flotilla by Emma Hine. The first novel from award-winning poet Hine follows Karina and Ursa, two estranged sisters, concealing a devastating childhood secret aboard a flotilla of spaceships. A lyrical meditation on sisterhood and loss that blends the domestic and the galactic, the post-apocalyptic and the elegiac. Tempted by that, Despot?
Yeah, it's like a sci-fi epic, except it's all insular. You know, instead of her sitting in her bedroom thinking about her past and trying to process it, she's sitting in a spaceship doing it. So
Yeah, it's
perfect.
exciting. Well, you've also got Gatsby by Alex Swan, which is a sexy reimagining of F. Scott Fitzgerald's classic set in contemporary Mykonos in Greece.
What's
So that
Mykonos?
should be exciting. That's a place in Greece.
That's the candies that it's like fruit flavored.
Yeah, might as well be. And Even Your Bones Would Do by Claire Schultz, which is a gothic fairy tale with a modern sapphic twist, as Bluebeard is reimagined as a ghostly love story.
Oh my god.
That's good.
The words
That
sapphic
name.
romance are a fucking plague on the publishing industry right now.
But Despot, I found the anti-Despot book, and I'm very proud of this. It is the anti-Despot. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Here it comes. Detransition Baby by Tori Peters. The characters are Reese, a trans woman and former partner of Amy, who detransitioned to live as a man and become Ames, and Katrina, a biracial Chinese and Jewish cis woman who was Ames's boss and current lover. All three are in their 30s and live in Brooklyn. After the end of their relationship, Reese and Ames have been estranged because of Ames' decision to detransition 3 years ago. Katrina discovers that she is pregnant with Ames's child. Because of his complicated relationship with his gender, Ames is hesitant to accept the role of a father to a child in a heterotypical family because of the label's social connotations of masculinity.
I actually saw the first paragraph on your X, and I loved it because I had no idea what the hell the narrative or the plot or who the characters were, because it's so preoccupied with labels that it gets in the way of the description, and I have no idea who anybody is or what the rules of the plot are.
This is the bestseller, by the way. Just want to make that clear.
Wait, what? This is actually a bestseller?
Yes.
Jesus Christ! And I can't even. I don't even know what the plot is, because it's just so full of these wretched labels that were invented 5 minutes ago that it's impossible to comprehend. I mean, I suppose. No, it's incomprehensible, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a mess.
Well, so then what I decided to do...
You know what this reminds me of? So I've been reading up on George Orwell recently. I like wiki quote, and I'll read through the quotes. And here's a brilliant quote from George Orwell. It's something to the effect of, you know that the goose step looks ridiculous and you daren't laugh at it. Now, the point he's making is that this is what true power and authoritarianism looks like. We are so powerful and so terrifying. We have so infiltrated the social fabric and the social milieu and the minds of the average citizen that we can literally goose step this ridiculous, fucking farcical, cartoonish goose step, and you can't even laugh at it, because if you laugh, you know what's going to happen. That's what that reminds me of. That is a cartoon. That is a ridiculous literary equivalent of a goose step. It's ridiculous. And you're not allowed to laugh at it and say, get this shit off my table, because you know what would happen.
Well, I went kind of meta, and so I asked ChatGPT, write an imagined but accurate as possible scene from Detransition Baby by Taurus Peters, in which two of the main characters are debating their circumstances when they are interrupted by YouTube critic Despot of Antrim, who castigates them for their flakiness and absurd hyper-identity mentality. Okay, so this is going to be kind of weird, but I hate to say this, Despot, but I think the ChatGPT version of you is almost actually better than the real you, because ChatGPT really delivered. So hope you don't take offense at that. But what we're going to do is we're going to go through what ChatGPT came up with, and you're going to read you as generated by ChatGPT. Are you ready? Okay, so this might be a bit weird, so hold on to your pants. We'll try this. Okay. The cafe was half empty, just the low murmur of an espresso machine and the rain at the window. Reese stirred her oat milk latte, looking unimpressed. So what, you're saying you regret it? Ames shifted in their seat, fingers tightening around the lip of their cup. Not regret, just, they exhaled, it's complicated. Reese snorted. It's always complicated, but you don't get to press rewind just because it's hard. What, you thought we were building some gender utopia where no one has ever had doubts? Ames met her gaze, jaw tense. It's not about doubt, it's about feeling like maybe you what? Reese pressed. Had it easier before? Were better off when people were happy to see you as a man? Ames swallowed. That wasn't exactly it. Or maybe it was. Maybe it was easier before the transitions, before the recalibrations of selfhood that never seemed to land. Before either could say more, a voice sliced into the air, crisped with irritation.
Oh, for God's sake, this is insufferable.
Both turned. A man in a worn jacket stood at the adjacent table, arms folded, exuding the wary disdain of someone who had suffered too much exposure to postmodernist rambling. His expression hovered between amusement and exasperation, like a teacher disappointed in his least promising students.
All right. You lot, he continued, are the precise reason no one takes this nonsense seriously. The unending self-analysis, the obsessive identity rearrangement. It's like watching a poorly scripted existentialist play written by someone who dropped out of their own philosophy degree.
Reese blinked, then laughed, short and sharp. Who the hell are you?
The Despot of Antrim,
he said with a performative little bow.
You might know me from the internet. If you ever stopped navel gazing long enough to engage with reality, and I must say, no, I'm gonna get through it.
Okay.
Listening to you two disassemble yourselves into ever more fractured, self-contradicting identities is.
You're doing great.
Is bleakly fascinating. It's like watching people argue over the feng shui of a collapsing building.
Ames stared. Do you always just insert yourself into people's conversations?
When they're loudly embodying the death of them. Yes, I feel obliged.
He leaned back, taking them both in.
You know, people used to have identity crisis with a bit of dignity. They drank, they fled to Paris, they got into an ill-advised love affairs and wrote melancholic poetry. What you lot do is a kind of self-mythologizing without even the good sense to make it tragic.
Reese, who had been gearing up for a response, stopped. Her lips twitched. You sound like my dad.
Oh, don't be cruel.
Despot said, mock-affronted.
I'm at least 20% more entertaining than your father. I promise you that.
Ames rubbed their temple. This is surreal.
It should be.
Despot agreed.
You're all living in a world where identity is both everything and nothing, switching at whim like a performance art piece that refuses to end. But do carry on. I wouldn't dream of stopping such a perfect encapsulation of contemporary absurdity.
Reese exchanged a glance with Ames, half exasperated, half amused. Well, she said, lifting her coffee, cheers to being a catastrophe, I guess. Despot gave a dry smile.
At least that's an ethos.
Well done, Despot. Great performance there.
Right.
So, Greg, you agree with me that actually the ChatGPT version of Despot is actually really good?
I mean, honestly, it is. And if he doesn't start his next video with I'm Despot, you may know me from the internet,
Yeah.
he's going to be so disappointed.
Yeah. Okay. ChatGPT YouTube critic Random Film Talk gives a critical review of the continuity and contextual glitches and contrivances of the Despot of Antrim scene. So,
Oh,
Random,
good
if you
God.
will, go.
Oh, God. Hey, folks, instead of the usual film breakdown, I want to talk about a scene that, let's be honest, feels like it was dropped into its novel from another dimension. I'm talking about the Despot of Antrim scene in Detransition Baby. Let's start with the most obvious issue. How is he even here? Despot of Antrim is a YouTube critic known for his sardonic takes on culture, but Detransition Baby is a novel set firmly in New York. As it stands, the Despot of Antrim scene is a meta-interruption. It doesn't function as a natural part of the novel. It's a break in the fourth wall where the author vents a frustration.
All right. So, yeah, thanks, Random, for your ChatGPT version of yourself.
Gigantic plot hole.
So, yeah, so I think we resolved everything there. But, yeah. So, Kristin, thoughts on Detransition Baby?
Oh my God. It sounds about par for the course. And the fact that books like this, one, exist, and two, that they act like they're normal is apparently a trend. And even though the culture has somewhat shifted, and I'm assuming this is, because the publishing pipeline is so long, 2 to 3 years, we're still getting this crap, and we can expect to get it for the next 3 to 5 years. And what startled me about the comment section in particular, with the series of 3 videos, you just have this flood of people who say, nope, I have read many books and the protagonist was male, therefore there is plenty of men's fiction. And they point to stuff like this. And it's like, are you, what? Are you insane? And the answer to that is yes.
It's just, it's so preening. That's the thing. It's some of it might be coming from a genuine place where she has friends who have been going through these experiences. So it's not to discount that. It's the preening self-awareness and the preening progressivism of it to create these loops and dense interconnected things of everything from every angle put in there to create a sense of such introspective drama, people processing wounds rather than setting goals or engaging with their society. And that's why that literature from yesteryear, perhaps 20 years ago, was more about taking on society as a whole and finding your place within it and being an outsider in a wider sense, rather than this like crystallization and breaking down into obsessive, like ChatGPT said it better than the actual Despot about about micro identities and all that kind of stuff. So it is frustrating. So yeah, let's get on to this. Now, Greg, I sent you a whole bunch of stuff because you're in the trenches and I wanted to get your perspectives on it. And so I want to get to the source because boys aren't reading and writing as much as they should. So we have to start there before we work our way up the tiers to why not. So you've got sons. By the way, something has been nagging at me for a long time, which is you said that your son's very self-conscious in a staunch way about not being seen to be wearing coats. I can't fathom the logic of it. There's nothing unmasculine about wearing coats. I wear coats. You wear coats.
I don't.
Great,
I think
great masculine icons wear coats.
It shows weakness to be cold or something. I don't know. I can't remember what it was like to be a teenage boy. It was so long ago, but I'm sure that I tried to flex in some idiotic way at the time as well. Or I think they're just so busy that they can't be bothered with a coat. I think it's not all of it is bravado. I think some of it is just like, I can't stop to put a fucking coat on. I have to go immediately and do whatever it is that I'm doing. Have to.
But in Illinois winter, I mean, you'll perish from exposure to the elements if you don't wear a coat.
Yeah, it can get that. It's not all the time, but it oh yeah. And sometimes they still forget it. And I don't know. The like boomer side of me is like, well, you won't do that again, but they do. So that doesn't work. So I don't know. Okay.
So you've got the double benefits of the homeschooling side, plus being a dad, plus all these other aspects. So how much of this is actually legitimate and sensible and realistic and practicable, and how much of it is wishful thinking? So incorporating more action-oriented visual and hands-on learning, more nonfiction, more comics, graphic novels, or subjects like history, sports, or science, like in the very early formative years. Because it takes boys about 6 months to lag behind girls initially. And girls apparently are more rewarded for behavior thought as ideal of being able to sit still, being able to concentrate, more like that. So what do you reckon?
Yeah, it unfortunately, like in public school, and this is I don't like to bash public school like and be so mad about it, but it is one of the things that I don't like about the public school system. It is people have pointed out that there are a lot of things where and I want to phrase this nicely because I don't want to sound all Andrew Tate, but there are things that what we call normal is actually kind of the way that women kind of approach. Like people have pointed out that therapy is very women focused, and therapy, a lot of guys don't get anything out of therapy because it approaches it the way the woman would approach it, and then guys don't. And then the therapist is like, you're not working with this. And men are usually like, well, it's because this is not how I work my feelings out. Right. And so they end up feeling, they get treated like women, and it doesn't work. And it's the same thing with the school system. When you've got 30 kids in a classroom, you need them all to sit down and be quiet. You need that. Otherwise nothing will ever get done. And younger girls are so good at that. I mean, they're great in younger grades, especially, and younger boys. They sometimes physically just they can't sit. They'll just vibrate in their chair. I've seen this. And so there's obvious, like you said, there's a lot of contributing factors, and the larger class sizes and whatnot are part of that. But yes, they get told they're doing it wrong because it's just, I mean, part of it is that it's not suited to them. And obviously I don't want to gentle parent it and I just act like we can make the environment for them all the time. But yeah, they need to move more. Something that I bring up a lot. I had the 6th grade teacher, Miss Gaskell. She was the greatest. Actually, I like science so much because she was awesome. She allowed me to stand in the back of the classroom, put my desk in the back, and she made a deal with me. She's like, you can stand up at your desk and like just move your feet and just wiggle and shit. You can't walk around the classroom and disturb people. But if you need to just stand there, like she said, that's fine. Just don't make a big thing. And I did, and I was able to focus more, and I really enjoyed her science class. And she was great. She got it that I couldn't just sit there. And I think a lot of boys are like that they just need to move a little bit more, and they do need to. There's a guy in the homeschool community that he has a whole course. Andrew Pudawa is the owner of Institute for Excellence in Writing, and he gives speeches about this. How like even when boys and girls are drawing, girls use a lot more color, and they kind of tell they use more characters, and the way they draw is more like what we think of as normal, like what you would see a picture. And then boys, it's just hand them a black pen because that's all they need, and it's usually a rocket ship, and there's shit just scribbled, and it's like lightning, and there's shit moving, but it's stick figures because they don't have time to flesh out because the shit is happening. There's a gun usually, like, and he always makes his point that it's so much more prevalent in younger kids that that's the way boys are. And there's a balance that needs to be struck between trying to obviously teach them that, hey, you do live in a society and you do need to behave in a way that's conducive to the people around you, but also we got to work with you a little bit and not ask you to do things that you can't do. And they would see a lot more success. So sorry,
number 2, the hands-on.
These points are very correct.
Yeah. So hands-on learning, literary instruction, more kinesthetic, story building with blocks, acting out stories, using props to tell a narrative, a reading scavenger hunt, following clues about a book, acting out scenes from a book. Like even now, like I'm a grown man, but I'm thinking back to being 6 or 7. That's going to be having me blazing with interest if I'm doing that stuff. And adventure and humor in text, books that feature strong male characters on adventures help maintain their interest, and integrating funny and irreverent books. But especially that second one, like it just gets to this deep instinct to me as a guy that if I'm a 7 or 8-year-old boy, I want to be doing that stuff. It's going to make me hooked on storytelling. It's going to be irreverent, and it's going to become like the kooky overspilling of fun and irreverence that comes with it as well. So yeah, those are a couple of things. And then these 2. What do you think about this? Audiobooks. So many boys who struggle with reading fluency still enjoy listening to stories. Audiobooks provide a way to engage with text in a less challenging format, helping build comprehension and vocabulary. Audiobooks paired with physical copies. So if you've got the book in front of you and you're following along while the voice is in your headphones, that seems okay to me. Now, wouldn't overwhelming majority of people say that audiobooks would be not an ideal way for learning literacy in kids?
I think some people say that, but that is, again, oddly enough, I didn't mean to mention him, but Andrew Pudawa gave me this idea years ago. I saw him at a homeschool conference because I do cool shit. And he suggested this, that boys, young boys especially, just give them audiobooks, tons and tons of audiobooks, and make sure that you fill your audio library with a mixture of stuff that they like Percy Jackson. And then also some more, try to push their boundaries a little bit, with some genres or some subjects, or just a reading language that is a little bit above their capabilities. And he said that he had a dyslexic kid, and rather than fight that over and over and make that kid beat his head against the wall, he just filled an iPod full of books. And so I do that. We started doing that, took that advice, ran with it. And my kids listen to audiobooks constantly. My boys, especially action oriented type stuff. I've like all these things you're describing. I've physically seen success with this over the years. And they have astounding vocabulary compared to their peers because they're hearing books, they're hearing this kind of language all the time. They don't, one thing I don't do is I don't typically pair the reading physically with the audiobooks yet. But what I can say is that some of my sons were not into reading physical books. And so we just said, that's cool. Listen to books. Listen to as many books as you want in the middle of the day, during nap time, at night, before bed, while you're doing your schoolwork. Listen to as many books as you want. No limit. And then over time, they began to realize they like stories. And then they got into reading physically later. And that's another one of those boy-girl things that girls will take to reading a lot sooner, younger, and boys just in general don't want to, but they still can get interested in stories and then pick up physical reading later. And there are slight differences, but as far as what it does to your brain, what it does for your imagination, what it does for your language comprehension, what it does for your vocabulary, people act like audiobooks are such a pale imitation of reading, and they are absolutely not. As a matter of fact, they have a big advantage over physical books in that they teach kids the cadence of storytelling and how to dramatically use their voice and how to emphasize things and how to show emotion with your voice. And so there is actually an advantage there that books don't have. People should not be sleeping on audiobooks. They're fabulous.
Plus, also, if you want to deprogram them from the cadences of speech that they're used to, that must be a bit jarring for them. Like if most of their content is, "What's up, you guys? Today on the channel we're going to be talking about blah blah blah," and then they've got to listen to, and then the cowboy went
Echo.
to
be honest,
the
I feel like you really shouldn't, interfere with the speech cadence of kids today, because why would you interfere with that? Like, what's wrong with that? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Oh my god, why don't you just I don't know, just shut up, because whatevs. I don't know. Like, for real.
You're kind of harshing my vibe right now.
Yeah. So that's at that level. And then you get up to what we're talking about last time, which was the school writing competitions. And I'll make the point again. Girls can talk more about what's viscerally compelling to them, interpersonal relationships, identity, that kind of stuff. Boys, they can't write about stuff which is viscerally compelling to them at high school level in these writing competitions, high school writing competitions, about the sexually competitive, the illicit, the grotty, the darkly humorous, because they feel instinctively that it's not going to place in these competitions, or not going to be considered legitimate or serious. When a lot of that it can be very sophisticated if done right. And they're going to botch it because they're still young. But you need to be able to see the fundamentals of what's in there and see, yeah, they're on the right track. They're developing in a way that's quite coarse and lacking in ironic control, but you can see how they're developing, so we want to reward them. But I don't think that's allowable in these writing competitions, which is suffused with winner after winner of identity-driven, dealing with trauma, internalized struggle stuff, which is anathema to boys and turns them off. So that's the high school level. And then we go to the third tier, which is why men aren't reading. One is for all these reasons we've gone through. Another is they like cool role modeling. They want authors who are cool. They want a cultural zeitgeist of literature that's cool, that is boundary pushing and edgy, and books that people discuss outside the literary landscape because they puncture through into the mainstream, into the zeitgeist. They like that role modeling. They like their Irvin Welsh's, their Martin Amos's, their Ian McEwan's. They like that stuff. And if those writers aren't there as good role models, and then writing doesn't seem cool, and then they become disengaged there. So I want to know the extent to which you guys think that idea of literature having to be cool and having to have cool role models in order to bring in male readers who are like this untapped potential there. Thoughts?
I would say that the role model thing is accurate. I don't think that cool is a necessity, though, and I think Brandon Sanderson really accentuates how, like, he just seems like the coolest guy. Like, not cool in a edgy, awesome James Dean kind of way. He just seems like the nicest guy that you want to hang out with, but not have a beer because he's Mormon. But you want to hang out and have an uncaffeinated beverage with, and he just seems like the funnest person. He's so down to earth. Everybody says he's a really, really, really nice person, genuinely. And he is like, he really is a big nerd that got rich. And rather than go do horrible things, he built a giant mansion with a theater and just filled it with all the toys and neat things that his little nerd heart always wanted. And I think that I agree with you that the edgy, cool author is something that a lot of guys do resonate with. But then I think there's also the just down to earth, fun guy author that is not pretentious and doesn't seem like a piece of shit that you would want to meet at a convention and just really want to hang out with and get to know. And I think that he exemplifies that side of it as well.
Mm-hmm. So, Kristin, you raised an interesting point in one of your videos, the idea that there aren't romance novels from a male perspective written by men. And I thought that through, and I thought that's absolutely true. There's no idea of what romance or passion or the pursuit of romance from a male perspective. I'd been thinking in terms of the gritty and the anti-societal, but I hadn't even thought that I should put some thought to that idea as well. And that extreme is the more sensitive coming from there. So I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that and also give you the floor, because this is kind of like a pet concern of yours, this whole male reading thing. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. And I was surprised to hear that there was, even a demand, a gap in the market for men who wanted to hear about dating and romance, because especially when you look at the Gen Z, who apparently are adults now, the oldest of Gen Z are grown, and they have no idea not only how to date, they don't know how to approach a woman, they don't know how to have a conversation with a woman, and they're just completely, if they have a friend group, it's all exclusively male, and they're feeling like they don't even know how to be in a romantic situation. And
50% of young men have never actually approached a woman, like in public or in some setting. And then this is the new thing I saw on the interwebs, this whole dialogue going on about how it's intrusive and almost kind of male chauvinist to approach women in public, like to flirt with them or ask for the number. So that's
right.
Thing.
And it's gotten to the point where if you're a pickup artist, that's a slur. And I get it. They had that stupid reality TV show of Mystery, or the idiot with the hat. Like, I get it. I get why there's a bad reputation. But the fact that you would call it harassment when a young man walks up to you, it's like, hey, I see you over with your friends. Would you like to meet up tonight? Like, that's harassment. Really? It's bizarre. But that's the world that these young men live in, and a lot of them, if they don't have fathers, so they don't have any template at all except for chick stuff like Hallmark movies, and that doesn't resonate with men. And of course, the disgusting books that pass for romance that are directed towards women are in no way helpful, because they're looking at this like, is this what I'm supposed to be? I don't want to be that, and I don't want the girls who want me to be that either. And, so I I met author Ryan Stone, who's transitioning into fiction from nonfiction. And he wrote a work that's about a military guy who's kind of sleeping around and being irresponsible, but who then kind of accidentally transitions into, I like this girl, and here's why I like her. And it's from a male perspective, and you see him struggling with his morality. And is it really his morality, or is it based on what the kind of female perspective has taught him to be? And, it's like, well, how do I make this work for me and my life? It's not from a religious perspective. And it was astounding, because I'd never read that before. Like, I was in the military myself, so I was more inculcated in the male sense of the way that they're different. But just seeing it firsthand like that was it was new to me. And I'm like, I don't think I've ever seen anything like this at all in a book ever. When you see a man in a romance, he's already married to the lady. It's like, oh, this is my wife of 15 years. I love her very much. And the relationship is already cemented. You don't see that kind of romance from a male perspective in the pursuit and deciding who he wants to be in this burgeoning relationship.
Yeah, you're right. More broadly, your thoughts on the industry and men's place in it. What are your thoughts?
It's bad. It is so bad. And if you're on X or any social media and you just see the way that agents, 80% female, and even some, editorial people in the publishing houses, 80% female, speak about males in general, about male authors, about what men have the temerity to write fiction about, the way that they spit about the early 2000s era, where you had the transgressive fiction, where you had the Tucker Maxes of the world coming out, just writing very male memoirs and creative nonfiction, and just how glad they are they stamped that out. It's like, these are the women that you're giving your manuscript to. I've
been looking at these literary agencies, and it's almost to the point of caricature now. They all look the same. There's the Grand Dame, who's the founder, who set the thing up in the 1980s, and sometimes she'll even be dead, and I'll just leave her bio up as like a memoriam. And then there's 5 liberal, cosmopolitan New York women in their 20s or 30s, and at least one of them will literally say in what they're looking for, I'm looking for strong female narratives, strong feminist perspectives. They literally just say that. And then there's one guy, and there's like a 50% chance he's just only wanting nonfiction. And it's that same template of agency after agency after agency. And so, as a male who's in the trenches right now with submissions, I do feel that I'm trying to get through this membrane of things where I've got to tailor my query letter specifically. I've got to pull back on some of my bio stuff. And it's a real shame. And it's very abrupt the way that it's happened to.
Yeah, and it's so over. And I had a client, and I created a query letter for him, and I told him, okay, customize each of these sentences for your agent that you're querying, right? And he was like, okay, great. And he kept getting all of these denials, and he sent it back to me. He's like, look, I customized for the agent, but I also made some changes. Can you read it for me and let me know if I made a mistake? In the query letter, he said, my book stands as a thumb in the eye of wokeness. And I'm like,
oh my God, he's not going to get published anywhere.
You're sending this to? And he was like, well, I wanted to make sure that the agent knew what they were getting. I'm like, they did, and that's why they declined.
Yeah. So it's what do you think about my theory about men liking to see cool role modeling of cool male authors? I think there's something actually in that. I think if there were tons of Amoses and McEwens and Rushdies and those types, and there was like a thriving, burgeoning, and kind of roiling literary scene where it was cool to be in that scene, and these authors had prestige to them and a kind of mystique and allure, then you'd have more men, especially young men, wanting to get interested and involved in the scene. It would become cool again. What do you think about my theory?
I think the cool authors, or at least the likable authors, would help men, want to be writers. But in terms of the reader perspective, it doesn't necessarily have to be a cool author. I think the book itself has to have cachet. It's like, all right, if I'm reading this book, then other dudes will think that I'm cool. They'll think that I'm smart, or they'll want to talk to me about it because they've read it too. Or better yet, girls might want to come and talk to me if I'm reading this awesome book. And they think I'm awesome. So either the book or the author, if they had some more cachet, and you post it on social media, it's kind of like the male version of Book Talk, where all these insipid women are like, oh, this is the book that I'm reading. She didn't read it. She just skimmed the dialogue, and so she could post about it. But exactly having that cachet is good because it gets, dialogue started, and, maybe they'll actually read one day.
Are modern authors too homebodies? I want authors turning up stoned to interviews, or hungover, or revelries and debauchery till sunrise, moving with other writers to hip lower-class quarters of foreign cities, stealing each other's partners, entering into public rivalries and disputes, and playing them out during live shows. Like Ian McEwan, he came out with his novel Saturday, and then John Banville, I think it was, literally just wrote an editorial about it. He just said, this is fucking nonsense, and totally torpedoed the guy's chance of getting the Booker. I miss that kind of rivalry stuff. I want the illicit, the transgressive, the stylish, the brutal, the gratuitous, science and technology, and the dystopian, visceral and grotesque with the high literary, like Cormac McCarthy and stuff like that. I think that if Ian McEwan was starting out with some of his short story collections, or The Cement Garden, or Cormac McCarthy was starting out now, they wouldn't get a publisher in the current environment. That's another thought. And one last thing on this. So a lack of cultural anchors. Contemporary fiction often feels like it's floating in a space without a clear unifying focus. And the dressing up of clearly woman-oriented commercial fiction as literary fiction. This is a big bugbear of mine. So book club fiction, which often describes as literary, but more often leans towards commercial. And in 1995, 95% of that is for women. Contemporary fiction, which is also just another term, I think, for women's fiction. And there's another thing when you look at these literary agencies, they have like a sense of grandeur about themselves. They say, I'm especially on the lookout for stylish, boundary-pushing literary fiction. And then you look at the actual books they've engaged with and published, and it's nothing but like shallow contemporary fiction stuff. So they have a bit of a disconnect in their minds there. So that's the literary scene. Oh my God. So on a lighter note, Despot, which one do you want to start off with out of your two slidey things? Spider-Man. Okie doke.
Okay, so this segment is called Movies That Are Worse on a Rewatch. And of course, I think Spider-Man No Way Home has kind of become the poster boy for that type of movie, because it was heralded as really a great movie when it came out. People thought, could this be the greatest ever Marvel movie? And very quickly, people realized that it was a cheap pile of nostalgia bait. It was dumb. It had broken in-world mechanics. There was quite a bit of character assassination going on, especially with the villains. It was cheesy and corny, and some of the CGI was... It's just a bad movie. It's not the worst thing that Marvel have done post-Endgame, or, well, really post-Infinity War. Endgame's fucking terrible, but it's a bad movie. And anyone who goes back to rewatch it today will almost certainly have that effect on them. They'll think, Jesus, did I actually really like this? So I thought that was an interesting idea. And I put out a community post on my YouTube channel and said, which movies get worse on a rewatch? And so I have made a compilation based on the responses to that post and also my general research online. I looked on Reddit and on all sorts of other websites, and I selected the most upvoted replies. And these are basically the movies that the internet, which you may have heard of, has...
You're someone from the internet.
I'm from the internet. That's where I'm from. So the internet has decided that these are basically some of the movies that do get worse on a rewatch. So certainly these are the most mentioned ones in all the posts that I saw. So I'm not going to be monologuing here. If anybody just wants to jump in and give their opinions, feel free to do so. So can you bring up the next one, please, Echo?
Okay. Let me think. So that's this one right here.
All right. I was a little surprised by this because I didn't know that this was ever held in particularly high regard. I always thought of Avatar as it's just a popcorn movie. It's a bit of fun, but apparently there's a lot of people who really thought it was great and took it seriously. And it was only when they rewatched it that they realized that it's kind of shit.
Honestly, when I heard you describe like what this segment was going to be, Avatar is the first Avatar is the first film that popped into my head. I think part of it is because when it came out, it really did do the whole transporting you to another world thing in a way that no other film had. Whereas when you rewatch it now, because I think I rewatched it just before Avatar 2 came out, and I mean, everyone knows that the story is just, passably okay. The characters are thin, which means you're watching a very nice looking animation, and it looks really nice. And like the visual effects are still good, but highest grossing movie of all time, I still don't know how that happened.
Yeah, people thronged to the cinema. It was like some weird mania. People with their 3D glasses and whatnot. And I was sitting in my chair thinking, yeah, like this is pretty good, but it's not a great film. I don't know why it's a cultural phenomenon. And I don't know why the third one that's being talked up by the director is going to be even longer than the second one. So it's going to be, why do you need 3.5 hours for these things? It's bizarre.
Yeah, it actually did have, people say Avatar didn't have any cultural impact. It did. The first Avatar movie basically gave birth to the 3D cinema plague that really lasted about 4 years from 2009 to 2013. It was pretty much dead by 2013. If you want to, I did a little segment on it in my Dread video. And I remember the 3D cinema. I fucking hated it, man. It was just a hassle. It was a headache. It made the cinema more expensive. You had to remember to bring your glasses, or you had to buy the filthy fucking glasses that they had there, or you could they would give you the glasses and they were disgusting because 40 other people had worn them that week and they hadn't been washed. Jesus, and just the thing itself was wrong. Like cinema shouldn't look like that. It should be flat. It's photography. Anyway, don't get me started on 3D cinema. But next slide, please. Hey, can I control these slides? Oh, wow, I can control these slides. I got this. All right, so Saving Private Ryan. This one came up quite a lot in my comment section, which pleased me because I think that this is a movie that gets worse in a rewatch. And at first, I thought the main reason was because of the presentation of the Germans. They are basically caricatures of evil, They're not treated as, human beings, soldiers that were involved in a conflict. The vast majority of them, just young guys from Germany that got conscripted into the army and sent to, in this case, France. They're not politically or ideologically, they might have been indoctrinated, but at the same time, they're just as they have just as much of an inner world as any of the Americans. But this movie, all of the Americans have their own little inner world, their own lives back home, and the Germans are just these empty. shells of mean-looking 40-year-old baldy men. It's so caricaturous when you watch it now. There's other horrible elements of it. For example, there's a little geek character. I can't remember his name, but he's brought in as a translator. What's his name?
Upham.
Upham. So Upham's arc is war will make you a man. And that's a hideous, hideous arc. And at the end of it, he murders a German soldier who's trying to surrender. Like, that's fucking murder. And the sun is shining behind him as if to say his arc is complete and now he's a man. It's awful. And then there's these horrible cliched scenes where American soldiers have been shot and they pull a letter to their mother out and they start reading the letter. And it's the most horrible cliche. But meanwhile, when the German soldiers are shot, they just drop dead like a sack of shite. There's long, boring scenes of soldiers walking through fields talking vapid shit. I mean, the more I think about it, the worse.
Sorry, Despot, who's in the middle of a wind turbine? Is that you, Random?
It's not me because I can hear it.
I can hear it.
Who was that? Is that Greg? Yeah, it must be Greg. Greg's in the middle of a wind turbine.
So Saving Private, it's still a good movie because the action is so good and the battle scenes look great. Especially the opening scene, obviously the famous opening. But this is definitely a movie that gets worse in a rewatch. All right, so
well, certainly very top heavy because it's got like 20 minutes of top heavy, incredible visceral action, and then a gigantic hour-long lull, and then the tank scene in the town at the end. So structurally, it's very lopsided. But I guess it's just a film that needed to work because it's Spielberg, Tom Hanks, and World War II and D-Day. So those three things combined together, everyone agrees that it has to be good and has to succeed because those three things alchemized together could not culturally not succeed. So it's a film that needed to succeed and be sort of
and this is also constantly brought up in I think people are angry that Shakespeare in Love won Best Movie over this, but Shakespeare in Love is actually a better movie in retrospect.
Okay, that is. I was about to ask you that question. I need to rewatch Shakespeare. Yeah, because I watched that years ago. I was like, what the fuck? Why? What? Well, how did this beat Saving Private Ryan?
It's actually a very clever movie. It's much better than you might think on first watch. It's a movie that gets better as you watch it. It's very clever.
Yeah, but the other thing is that Judi Dench won Best Supporting Actress, and she was in the film for about 5 minutes.
That was absurd.
Yes. Yeah.
That was weird.
The Dark Knight. This one came up a few times, and I still think this is a very good movie, but there are things wrong with it. So, for example, there is unreality, the sort of hyper reality of comic book movies, which you accept. And then there's so you accept that, but even within the context of the comic book hyper reality, this movie just lacks verisimilitude, in my opinion. Like, it's so absurd. So much of it is ridiculous. The Joker knows things that he just shouldn't know. He's able to do things and get people to behave in ways that is utterly ridiculous and is not explained by the hyper reality of the comic book movie world. Of course, it's unrealistic. We accept that, but there's a difference between lack of realism and lack of believability, lack of verisimilitude. And when you watch this movie again with that in mind, it really does suffer from basically a ton of plot contrivance. And I'll just give you one example, and I could go on forever. So Batman needs to go to Hong Kong to kidnap a Chinese billionaire, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So when the Chinese billionaire knows that Batman is coming, what does he do? Does he run to a safe room in his building? Does he run to a random floor where Batman can't find him? Do his guards pull him into some secure room and just lock the door? No. He pulls out a gun and goes after Batman. Why does he do this? Because the plot needs Batman to kidnap him. And that's just one example. There's tons of them in this movie.
In its defense, I would say that it's a time and a place thing. So, for example, the Beatles can put out Sgt. Pepper's, and in its time and cultural place, it's a gigantic vaulting advance. So this did to kind of superhero comic book movies the same sort of thing of a huge vaulting advance. Now, in the 10 years afterward, you can see all the holes and the contrivances and everything else. Just like with Sgt. Pepper's 30 years on, you can hear all the glitches and problems and issues. But you got to put it in the context of what was just before it in the cultural milieu, and then how this took a vaulting jump upwards from that. And you got to look at purely in that frame. That's my perspective.
I agree, and that's why I say it's still a good movie, and it's vastly superior to basically all Marvel slop that gets produced nowadays. But the problem is, it's generally regarded as some sort of often people will say this is one of the greatest movies ever made. It's a masterpiece. It's the
Right.
greatest comic book movie ever made. And that's too much. It's like, yes, you give it credit, you put it in its context, and it really did advance that genre, but it's definitely not as good as people seem to think. There are problems with it, very straightforward, simple problems. It's a good movie, but yeah, there's serious issues. And Harvey Dent as well, like it's a very forced character arc. I get it. It's all about the themes, the fallen hero, the best of humanity, even the best among us can fall to the depths of moral depravity. I get it. But it's so ham-fisted and forced, his character arc, and he's running around with half a face. It's so cartoonish.
It was rushed and botched, wasn't it? He was by far the weakest element of it. Yeah.
So I think it's a movie that people don't want to accept isn't great. It's very good. It's a good movie, but it's not a great movie, and people have trouble accepting that. Any thoughts? Anybody else?
I think that I would say that it is very good to great. It definitely has major problems, and I would definitely say that it is possibly the most overrated movie ever made. Because, you're talking, like, if we put this movie at, I say it's maybe a 7 or an 8 out of 10, and the world seems to think it's a 10 out of 10. Like on IMDb, it's like number 3 or 4, sandwiched in between 12 Angry Men and The Godfather Part 2 or some shit. That is obscene. I think that, like you were saying, Echo, like when it came out at exactly the right time. It is an incredibly well presented movie, which is, of course, tradition for Nolan movies, even The Dark Knight Rises, which I honestly think is garbage. But also you have everything surrounding this movie with Heath Ledger, which I definitely think that contributed in the same way that like Paul Walker contributed to the success of Fast and Furious 7, the fact that they died kind of while making it or immediately after. And then on top of that, you have the fact that there's this new version of the Joker, because the Joker prior to this was, apart from, I guess, the animated version, would have been Jack Nicholson in 1991, I think, or 92, whenever it was, or 89. 89, yes. So it's been, 20 years since we last had a live-action Joker, and then you get this one, and people were like, oh, is this... Heath Ledger is horribly miscast, and then the word of mouth surrounding that film was just ridiculous. So I think that will have led to it being overhyped, for sure.
Yeah. All right.
So Joker was really common. This is, you could call this a cultural retcon, whereby the sequel is so bad that people actually they changed their mind about the first movie. This also happened with Ghostbusters.
Every single thing that you gave the benefit of the doubt with this film to, retroactively, you've now no longer give it the benefit of the doubt, which sucks so much.
I mean, does anyone think this is a bad movie?
No, see, I still like it. And even
I think it's a very good movie. I think it's a great movie, but I get it. Joker 2 was so... We'll get on to Joker 2. It was so bad that it actually makes this movie worse. That's how bad it is.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I still go back to what Quentin Tarantino said about the scene where he goes on the talk show, and the director has positioned you as the audience as the audience, you actually at some deep primal latent level want the Joker to actually kill Murray, that there's some strange thing that happens collectively to the audience during that scene. That's what Tarantino said, and that's an amazing thing to achieve. And the scene in the bathroom, it's incredible stuff, but retroactively destroyed. Are we going to memory hold Joker 2 after a couple of years, and we can again revisit this?
This is gonna reemerge as a cult movie. It's had such a weird arc. This movie, people said it's amazing, then they say it's trash because Joker 2 was so bad. I think in the future, it's going to develop a cult following, as in it's actually, all cultural stuff aside, it's actually a great movie. But we need some time for the miasma of Joker 2 to disappear.
Well, this one, you're right, it was a roller coaster because there were people that I think would have liked it, but it got this rap as this incel red pill movie that, will funnel you into Fresh and Fit's arms or some shit. Like it was this weird reputation that it had, that actually it put me off watching it because I was like, I don't want to watch that shit, And then I watched it after the sequel and I was like, wow, this is not what I was told it was. This is a really great movie. It's really fantastic. Now, you guys probably read the title as The Joker, which you fucking idiots shouldn't have done that. It's just called Joker. So honestly, it's your fault for expecting him to be more than he was, but that's on you guys. And I'm sorry that you're so dumb, but this one is still great.
All right. So
I agree.
All right, random. You can rant on it. You know what's really surprising? This was one of the most liked responses on my YouTube post. People saying, "Oh, The Hobbit was worse than a rewatch." I was shocked. I couldn't believe they liked it to begin with. But I'll let Random rant on this because he's done videos on The Hobbit.
So I can sympathize with people liking these movies when they first came out because they is similar to what we were saying earlier. We like Mandalorian. They feel like you are returning to Middle Earth, and they're not quite the same because in the same way as like the Star Wars prequels, they don't feel like they have the same drive behind them, the same heart. It all looks very artificial because of all the green screening and shit and the over reliance on visual effects. But then there's other parts of them that look amazing. And what I found with them when I first watched them, and I basically confirmed as a result of doing my videos on them, is that there is a really, really, really solid movie in there, and you take the really good scenes and you put them after each other. It's a great story because it is the story of the Hobbit that was in the books, but in particular the third one, the second one as well, but in particular the third one is just off the fucking wall nonsense from start to finish. And I mean, all of them definitely get worse on a repeat viewing. I would say that the first two I liked when I first watched them. I liked them a lot, but that was definitely a case of, oh, it made me feel like I'm watching The Lord of the Rings. As soon as you look at them critically and you detach yourself from that experience of being sat in the cinema, listening to the music and seeing Gandalf and all the rest of it, as soon as you detach yourself from that, they are not good movies at all.
Strange for me because these films are just purely surface. They have absolutely no emotional, thematic depth of any kind. And it's so weird because you're in the same world as the Peter Jackson trilogy, which had immense depth, but this is just purely shallow, and it's a strange watch. I couldn't get into it, even a flicker of emotion.
It's shallow. It also feels very corporate, like corporatized, if that's the word, in a way that like the Lord of the Rings movies did not. Because you have, for example, the forced insertion of a love triangle that did not exist in the book. Whereas in like the Lord of the Rings, when they added in changes from the book, it was usually very deliberate and for a purpose that was more than we need. The elf character of Tariel is confirmed. This isn't like some wacko conspiracy theory. Is confirmed that they included that character because the movies are too blokey without a woman. That is the only reason that character exists. And I then found it very amusing that the only purpose that character serves is to exist within a love triangle. It's like if that's all you're doing with your female character. Yeah, that's bad movies, not good.
Right.
I mean, I did try to rewatch The Hobbit. I didn't like them when I saw them in the cinema. I tried to rewatch The Hobbit, and it struck me. I failed, by the way, but it struck me that it was trying to copy the structure of The Fellowship of the Ring. So it opens with this voiceover narration, and it's trying to do the same sort of exposition opening that The Fellowship of the Ring did. So it reminded me of The Force Awakens almost, the way it's trying to copy The Fellowship and reproduce it, which was, I mean, that was essentially what they did wrong. They were trying to remake the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Well, they basically said, just very quickly, that there was an interview with Peter Jackson where he basically said that like he didn't want the battle sequences and like, the scale of the films to feel smaller than the Lord of the Rings, because it's coming out after the Lord of the Rings. So why would you want to scale things down? And that's the whole problem, is that it's the story of Bilbo. It's not world-ending stakes. It's not supposed to be, and they just dial it up so far that it gets ridiculous.
But it's okay
Kristin,
because
you clutched your pearls there for a second, Kristin. Like you had some thoughts. Oh, you figuratively clutched your pearls for a second there.
Oh yeah, well, you will all probably be amused by the stereotypical trueness of this, but the only reason that I saw The Hobbit was because I saw Lee Pace as Thranduil sat upon a giant elk. And I said, that is the most glorious looking man I've ever seen in my entire life. I don't care how much they've stretched the plot. I'm going to go see this, because the third one was in theater. So I rented the other two. And it was a painful experience from start to finish, but he was so beautiful that I suffered through it, and it was fun.
Thranduil is one of the best characters, I will say that.
Yes, he's just glorious, and I don't care if he bats for the other team. I can change it.
So this was quite a common one in my comment section, Deadpool and Wolverine. And I get why, because this is it's a bottom heavy movie. So the first act is the worst. It's really fucking boring and slow. It has a pretty fun opener, pretty fun action scene, but even the action scene is constantly interrupted by exposition and sort of a narrative voiceover which takes you back rather than just have the fucking action scene. It's longer than it needs to be. The first third's awful, frankly, and then the remaining 2/3 are also bad but really entertaining. And I think people, when they saw this in the cinema, they were so just entertained, and especially because the end of the movie was so entertaining, they forgot how boring it was at the start. Then when they went back to watch it, they thought, "Man, this movie's a mess. There's so much wrong with it. So many plot holes and long, boring stretches of guys just sitting around talking vapid shit." And and then the villain comes out of nowhere at the end, and she does the whole "let's destroy the multiverse" cliche.
That was horrible. This is the worst example of a second, third act I've ever seen. You've got the cool scene and the bus and everything and the big fight scene. It's great, natural trajectory upwards, and then pause, and then you've got a second, third act where they have to go in and link arms and save the day. Totally extraneous and pointless. I found this film kind of taxing, tiring to get through, like physically kind of tedious to get through. I like the chemistry between these two, but I couldn't see the thrill, to be honest. I don't know, man.
This one, I think, is like one of those situational ones where obviously I can't go back, but I would be interested if I would enjoy it if I rented it by myself to just see what everything was about. Because when I saw it, it was with a very good friend of mine, and we went to the theater together. So we were at the theater, we were having a great time. It was super fun. Everybody in the audience is laughing, and it was like one of those in the moment things where the experience is really fun. But even then, I knew the movie wasn't great, and so I think that had a lot to do with it. And it was a shitty summer, and this was kind of a bright spot. Everybody just wanted to have a good time, and in the theater, I think it was a good time. But it is a terrible movie.
I hated it on first watch anyway, and I don't plan on watching it a second time. Like the bare minimum that I was hoping for, I figured the plot making sense is already out the window because it's Marvel. It's built on Marvel's multiversal bullshit, so it's not going to make sense. At least entertain me and make me laugh, and it made me laugh, I think, 3 or 4 times, which in a Deadpool movie is not 2 is not great, and 2 is like way better than this one.
Yeah, this probably sums it up quite nicely, actually. This is a TV is on, but the party is playing beer pong movie. So
you
don't even have to really know what's going on. I didn't know what's going on, or half of the shit was on the screen.
Yeah. All right. So the only reason I have included this is to annoy Greg. This is Sean Baker showing off his 4 Oscars that his movie Anora won. All right.
Honestly,
no, you don't need to comment, Greg. We're done. I just wanted to annoy you by reminding you that Anora exists and that it.
I'm just glad that you're not going to try to pretend like you fucking like Red Rocket or some shit and like know Sean Baker's work. And well, I'm so glad that the masses now know this guy that I'm so fucking cool, like every other fucking reviewer has been doing.
All right, so let's move on.
Well, I think the real winner there. Just go back one slide. Just go back one slide, Despot.
Yeah, I'm going to go back. Did you see that slide, Greg? I just wanted to make sure that you saw it.
Well, I just want to say that the real winner is his orthodontist. Look at that. It's perfect.
I know.
It's astonishing.
All right. That's enough of that.
Okay.
So here is Joker. Fuck you, dude. Jeez. All right. Now, you might think it's bizarre that I've included this. This is a personal pick because it's rightly regarded as the worst movie of the year. But here's the thing.
Yeah, this doesn't
I haven't
fit with the theme.
I haven't rewatched it. But I've had to rewatch different scenes because I've talked about this movie in 3 or 4 videos. So I've done a lot of editing with it, and every time I open this thing in my editor, I always see things I didn't see before, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. Like when it came out, some people said, "Well, the cinematography is nice," and it's not. It's so bad. It's so gaudy. It really just does its best to try to draw attention to itself. It's try hard. There's these hideous yellow filters that it uses in Arkham. The cinematography is so bad. The acting, Joaquin Phoenix is fucking awful in this. People, when it came out, people said, "Oh, Joaquin Phoenix was good." No, he's not. It's a really phoned in, shitty performance, and it's so flat. Lady Gaga is terrible. Again, people were saying she was good. She's awful in this. Everything about it just gets worse every time I watch this. This is an amazing movie. This might be the worst movie of the 20s. Every time I watch this, it has layers of awfulness, and the more I see of it, it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. It's like an unending onion of awfulness. It's an astoundingly bad movie. It's an amazing achievement.
Yeah,
and it retroactively, shits on Joker. My God.
So you didn't like it, especially then?
One of the worst movies ever made. So this one was a big one. What's the name of the guy that directs this?
I know his name. I can't remember it.
I'm back.
You know what's really bad about this film? Keira Knightley was 17 when she made this film.
Richard Curtis.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the famous door scene, she was only 17 at the time, which is kind of creepy and weird.
Well, how old was her love interest?
He would have been...
Chiwetel Ejiofor would have been in his late 20s.
It's not too bad. I mean, it is legal in the UK. 16 and up is legal. So she's 17. He's in his late 20s. It's not ideal, but it's not the worst. So Love Actually by Richard Curtis. People were all saying this. Any Richard Curtis movie. That's what they said. Any Richard Curtis movie is worse than a rewatch. I really liked Notting Hill when I was a teenager. I thought that was a great movie.
It's an alright film.
Notting Hill's quite good, yeah.
Yeah, but I saw Love Actually once, and I don't even think it's trying to be a good movie. It's just trying to be a good time.
Yeah, I think so. It's not a very good film. It's cloying, chintzy, cheesy, mawkish, absurd. There's too many vignettes going on. I think it's supposed to be just like a mainstream, superficial, Christmassy, love-themed kind of film. I think probably even Curtis was probably quite surprised by how it's taken on some kind of cultural heft and become a mainstay of the Yuletide season. It's not especially a good film.
No,
I got to rewatch this one because I feel like I like it, but I haven't seen it in a long time. And part of me thinks that it's one of those ones that's popular to not like. And I think it might horseshoe back around and everybody's going to like it again because I like Richard Curtis movies. I'm not even embarrassed. I like fucking Bridget Jones' Diary. I think those are fun movies. They're just fun to watch. And I like
Kristin, have you seen these movies?
What's that?
Of course I have. Hello, millennial woman. Have I seen?
I'm just muting. I'm muting Greg for a while because I'm not happy about his recent comments there.
And yeah, I love Actually, and I can't speak for the men folk. I don't know if y'all ever liked it to begin with, but all these girls on the internet who are like, "Oh, it's so problematic. I don't like it anymore." Yes, you do, girl. Yes, you do. You watch it and you cry every time over Colin Firth learning Portuguese for that pretty little maid girl. They're liars. They're liars. I don't
Vindication.
Yeah.
Vindication.
Yeah, and the women are all hot. Like Keira Knightley's stunning. The Prime Minister's girl, she's hot. Emma Thompson's hot, and the girl below her, they're all hot, and it's women from sort of very young to middle aged. It's not like it's taking a woman and she has to be 22 and she has to have perky tits and she has to be absolutely perfect. It's not like that Hollywood ideal. It's just a nice broad range of women from a broad age group, and they're all hot. It's good.
And the men are just very charming. Like Hugh
Yeah.
Grant has enough charm; he can make anything work. But then, like even that wretched Ginger, who looks like my first cousin but is not, just the fact that I'm British and that's enough, and it is, and that's just it's a small part of the movie, but it's so funny. And even Alan Rickman in perhaps his worst, most atrocious role, and I am including Die Hard in that. Just wonderful, and yeah, everyone loves it. I don't care what anybody says.
So Greg, you like an occasional whimsical romp?
I tell you what, I do, and I'll tell you another one that I feel like Richard Curtis has this underrated one called About Time that not everybody knows. It's a fantastic fucking movie. Domhnall Gleeson is outstanding in that one, and it's either Rose McGowan or the other gal that she looks like. I can't remember, but that one really is. That's an excellent one.
Rachel McAdams. That's who's in it.
That's the one. Yeah, I always get that confused.
So
that
the internet is wrong. Richard Curtis movies are awesome.
That's right.
All right. Just Marvel movies. Everybody kept saying Marvel movies. Marvel movies are worse on a rewatch.
Yeah,
that's fair.
I 100% agree. Yeah, that's totally fair. That's great.
Well, can anyone think of a Marvel movie that got better on rewatch?
Iron Man's maybe the best one.
The first Iron Man, possibly.
Yeah, the first Iron Man, first Captain America, and Infinity. To be honest, I think there are only 3 great Marvel movies that I'm aware of. It's Infinity War, Captain America, the first one, and the first Iron Man, and the rest, whatever.
I thought Winter Soldier was better than
Winter Soldier is good too. Yeah,
Winter Soldier. I would even say Civil War.
That screen. That screen is just a big pile of steaming garbage, isn't it? When you actually take off your cultural affinities and your formative influences. If you just look at that screen, that's actually kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy 1 was pretty cool.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of garbage there.
The first 3 phases, I don't know, they were batting like 600, which is that's MVP status right there. It wasn't all perfect, but I think overall, I still think phases 1 through 3 are good, and it's almost like that Joker 2 effect where recent Marvel makes people think they always hated it, and I don't think that we did. I think they were still good movies.
Yeah,
some were actually good movies, like for real. Just on their own, you could analyze them and say, this is just a good movie. And then there were a few stinkers in there, but overall, I think they were good. And then they just lost track of what they were doing, unfortunately. And now...
Yeah, now Captain America, Brave New World. Let's
say
about that, the better.
Back like in phases 1 through 3, the criticism of Marvel movies was generally, the villains are shit. Like and broadly that was true. There were exceptions. But you compare that to now... give me a good movie with a shitty villain, like any day of the week, compared to the kind of shit that we're getting now.
Yeah.
So, Greg, this is the poster for Anora. It has 3 5-star reviews, as you can see. I'm just going to read these for you. Makes Pretty Woman look like a Disney movie. A stunning cinematic masterpiece. A wild, profane blast.
Oh, yeah.
And it also won the Oscar for Best Picture, as well as 3 other Oscars. Can you see this, Greg? Yeah,
I do.
All right,
I do.
Oh yeah, that was just another receiving. Oh, I was so pleased. I was so pleased to see that some people were finally coming around and admitting that this movie is bollocks.
I don't know why people liked it to begin with.
I know. God, piece of garbage.
Yeah, I mean. I finally watched it. I watched it like late. I only watched it, I think, a couple of weeks ago. And I will say that I did not hate it as much as I thought I was going to. But I hate, it is probably the most cynical movie I can think of in terms of the whole, drop this line from this other film for no particular reason. And they just do that repeatedly. I hate how it slots into the Alien franchise, like chronologically, and the damaging effect that it has on the surrounding movies. In particular, Alien and Aliens. It damages them more than anything else because it's set directly in between them. But
now you get the backstory and the filling out the story of Ripley's sneaker. Yeah.
I mean, the best thing I can say about it is that if you ignore the fact that it's part of the Alien franchise and you just treat it as a standalone movie, it has some effectively directed scary scenes, I guess. Horror sequences, I guess.
Yeah, I knew this would happen. When this came out and everybody was saying it was amazing, I knew that people were going to say later on, like next year, that it sucks, it's not actually good. You rewatch it and it's pretty bad. I tell you exactly what's going to happen. The next Alien movie is going to be awful. Like just absolutely dreadful that no one can even pretend to like it. And then this thing's going to get retconned. Then everybody's going to pretend that they hated it all along. Well, I'm not fucking having it. I remember you liked it. All right. And
I'm frustrated, though. I'm so frustrated, Despot, because I put out a negative review saying how terrible it was, and I got piled in on the reviews. I want my clicks now. Where are my retrospective clicks in my video?
The most negative, like my 12 worst movies of 2024 was a well-received video, but by far, the biggest pushback came from my negative review of Alien Romulus Ass. So many people think this movie's good.
Should I do a re-upload, which it says in the thumbnail, I was right, you were wrong, so click on this video and enjoy it retrospectively?
Say, I was right, you were wrong, this movie's bollocks, it's time for you to come here and kiss my fucking feet.
Because YouTube loves it when you do that.
Oh, Jesus Christ. So we all know how the prequels were kind of, they've had this weird arc in the culture. The sequels were so bad that people retconned the prequels to try to pretend they were good. I went and watched this again last year, and fuck me, it's terrible.
They are not good.
So I was making I was doing the Star Wars show, the fucking Acolyte, and I needed just a few scenes from this to fill the video out. And I caught after the war in the arena, and they're flying away, and they're in the ships, and Anakin just goes, fire at that thing, and they do it and it explodes, and Qui-Gon's like, great job, Padawan, like what the fuck? And then they get off, and Samuel L. Jackson has to go speak to some soldiers, and they just say like, hey sir, and he literally just points, and then they walk off together. It's just so fucking bad.
Yeah, well, let's be careful, because we'll be here for 6 hours if we go down this rabbit hole. So.
So that's this, and people I've even seen. I want to say this. I've even seen people try to pretend Jake Lloyd's acting is good and say he wasn't that bad. He was okay. It's like, lad, here's what the mistake they're making. Acting is reacting. They're looking at his line reads and they think, they're okay. Watch him during the pod race scene. Okay, he's driving at hundreds of miles an hour. He's flying this pod. He's should be he's an inch from death at all times, and he looks bored out of his mind. Okay, he was fucking awful in this. All right, this was George Lucas's fault, not the kid's fault.
Absolutely.
God, terrible. Don't try to tell me he wasn't that bad. He was dreadful. This was a weird one, but it kept coming up. It kept coming up, and it was one of the most upvoted comments. Frozen. I've never even seen Frozen.
I wish there was someone specific in our panel who might maybe have grown up with this or something like that. If there's just someone in our panel who maybe was female, maybe they had some perspectives they could.
Kristin, have you seen this?
Yes, but I did not see it until I think 2 years ago, and the only reason I did is because my nieces were singing the songs, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's from Frozen, and they were like quizzing me on my favorite part. I was like, oh, I've never seen it, and having 9-year-olds tell you that you're a failure as a human being, so I had to watch it, and it was fine. I don't get the hype. I know that people get mad at this. I was glad that they called out the Insta love thing. It's like, wait a minute, you got engaged to a guy you met yesterday. I liked that particular part. I hated the snowman. I wanted him to die. And why was Elsa the good guy? It's like, they should not have redeemed her. They should have just let her be the actual villain. So yeah, it was fine.
Greg, in your parental capacity, Greg, you must have seen this. This must just be on a loop in your household.
So many. Do I need to get the dress again? Because I can wear that again if you guys want. Actually, I heard that they changed it because that's how fucking good Idina Menzel is that they heard the song and they were like, damn, she can't be the villain. Like, her voice is that amazing that it changes entire plots. But I hate this movie so much. And but I genuinely am confused about this because I don't even think kids like it. They're just like told to like it. And it's the weird power of propaganda. But if that worked all the time, then Disney would make it work all the time. So I am actually confused why this was such a just monumental hit, but other stuff that's equally as mediocre doesn't do. Like, I don't know what the sauce was that made this $1 billion crazy. I still don't get it.
Yeah. The other confusing one for me is Inside Out 2. Like, it's fine, but how did that end up being like one of the highest grossing movies of the year? It with like kids films in particular, maybe it's because I don't really pay attention to them. You've tossed a coin. Is it going to make $1 billion or is it going to flop completely? Who knows?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's Frozen with the girls, I can tell you. It was twofold. One, the pretty dresses, and Elsa's pretty. They want to wear the costume. And two, the wine moms. I'm going to tell you right now that the little children themselves would not have loved it as much if not for their wine moms, because they were singing "Let It Go" at the top of their lungs in the minivan with the kids in the car. So, and they're my friends. So yes, it was the wine moms who did this.
That checks. Yeah.
All right, Echo, let her rip.
Well, I'm embarrassed about this, and I don't like being in a public forum having to talk about this because it gets to my self-awareness and my, someone who has a degree in the humanities and someone who has an ounce of democracy in their soul and someone who's in the creative arts. I feel embarrassed that I liked this film when it came out because retroactively, this has absolutely plummeted in my estimation to the point where it's almost unwatchable. It's the most pretentious twaddle. Even the fucking name Tar with the affectation above the A, everything. It's terrible. It's a film which is utterly pretentious, utterly up its own ass, trying to be super contemporary in its themes. Beautifully shot, I'll give it that. But it's preposterous. At the end where she bustles away the other conductor and shoves him aside, and then at the end to try and get all sort of meta and contemporary, she ends up conducting an orchestra in Southeast Asia, but that might not actually be the reality. It could just be like some meta twist in the mind. It's super pretentious and ridiculous. Everything about it sucks, and I have to take the L on this one. It's a blemish on my critical faculties, and I'm sorry to you guys. I'm sorry to the wider YouTube community. I'm sorry to everyone who's interacted with me on any social media platform. And if anyone wants to use this and bring it up as ammunition to castigate me or undermine me, that's entirely legitimate. I deserve it. And this is just something that I have to keep atoning for. And it's not up to me to decide when that's over. It's up to the internet and the wider community to decide that, not me. And I also have to internalize that. I have to take myself out of the conversation, reflect on that, and I have to learn what contrition really means. So I'm sorry.
I can't believe you misled us all.
I'm going to share. I'm going to share some of Echo's L. When this came out and I watched it, I basically lied to myself and pretended that I liked it because in my mind I thought, well, smart people are supposed to like this movie, so if I don't like it, I mustn't be smarter. I must be some sort of Philistine. But I knew in my heart of hearts that it was garbage. And then when Echo made a video in which he mentioned it was shit, it was like this load off my shoulders. I felt like, St. Peter on the road, or Paul on the road to Damascus. I'd been just hit by this light. I felt this load off my shoulders. And finally, yes, someone has said it. Tar is dog shit. And I felt vindicated and I felt cleansed of my sin. So yeah. I'll share, because in at least one video I did say this is a good movie, and then I retconned that later and said it was shit. But fuck me, that movie is such a pretentious pile of bollocks.
Yeah.
Obvious one, sequels.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Force Awakens. Yeah, I think that needs a huge retrospective analysis because everyone loved it when it came out. Everyone gave it the benefit of the doubt. It was a big kind of party atmosphere. But in retrospect, I don't think it's a very good film.
A big part of it, I think, is that it didn't. What came afterwards? Because I will happily admit that when I watched The Force Awakens for the first time in the cinema, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was like, "Thank fuck, we're away from the era of the prequels." Sorry. And then you have The Last Jedi, and my enthusiasm died overnight.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And you'll probably, and again, you'll laugh. I was at the forefront of the Reylo movement because I love this movie so much. And Adam Driver and I were to be wed. He did not know this, but I had plans for us. I love this movie so much. And then when The Last Jedi came out, I was there opening day. I was there with my girlfriends. We were all holding hands. And then Luke threw that fucking lightsaber, and I've never been okay since. That just ruined my whole life for a minute there. I hated it so much. And you're right, it does kind of make you look back. It's like, have I made a mistake? But I will rewatch The Force Awakens. I have rewatched that. I will rewatch none of the rest of them. Awful.
All right, and let's move. So we're almost done. Yeah, we'll just finish with Donnie Darko because Greg, you said you wanted to talk about Donnie Darko, and that did come up. I don't have a PDF of it, but it did get mentioned, and I did see it around the internet. People saying, "Yeah, Donnie Darko on a rewatch is actually pretty bad." So, Greg, what are your thoughts?
It's confusing, and it was who was it? Flonius brought it up too, because if you were in a certain age range, you try to convince people that you fucking got this movie. Like, it was super deep, and you were like, mega brains get it, okay, and the rest of you plebs just don't understand the depth of Donnie Darko, and I was one of those fucking people, and it's very embarrassing.
Yeah.
I was never a Fight Club person. Like, I liked it, but I wasn't like I wasn't one of those like you're not a fucking snowflake or whatever. Like, I didn't say that to people out loud. But I did try to convince people that I understood Donnie Darko, and those of you who don't get it, well, you're just morons, and I'm sorry, that can't be helped.
One interesting point with Donnie Darko is there is a huge difference between the director's cut and the theatrical version. And I haven't seen the theatrical in years, but the director's cut adds in like so much that kind of explains and like almost over explains. And from reading what some of the differences are, it almost seems like, having now seen the director's cut, the theatrical is deliberately like obtuse, like it's trying to not make sense. Yeah, I need to go back and rewatch it and see if I can work it out.
Greg, I imagine you were really in the same sort of vein. You thought in American Beauty, the scene with the paper bag, the plastic bag swirling around in the breeze, and that's the guy's footage, and it's like the most beautiful thing you ever filmed. I thought you probably thought that was, yeah, that's really profound.
Oh, absolutely.
I remember the Donnie Darko sort of cultural moment, and I remember hearing from my older brother and from some friends that it was just fucking amazing, and you've got to see this movie, man. It's like the most underground fucking cult thing you'll ever see. And I watched it, and I thought, well, that was a movie. I didn't particularly like it.
Yeah.
It was fine. I thought, yeah, it's fine, but I don't get why people are so fucking obsessed with this strange little movie.
Yeah. All it did was tickle my neuroses. Why aren't I appreciating this? Why aren't I getting the cultural sense of movement about this? And that's all it did for me. So no, it wasn't a great film.
What does the rabbit mean? What does the rabbit mean? It's all about, you see, you gotta, it's the deeper meaning of the rabbit. Fuck me. It was so adolescent. It was emo. That's what it was. It was emo. This coincided with emo, and it was just it hit the culture at exactly the right time. And, during the whole emo movement, and yeah, it's emo cringe. If you watch it today, it's just emo cringe.
And revive the Tears for Fears.
All around me.
Yeah. It was perfect for it.
Oh, and then it had that horrible wee piano number that became a one-hit wonder. Fuck that song.
Mad World. Yeah.
Happy.
Yeah.
I was really relieved when Napoleon Dynamite came out, because then everybody stopped quoting, "Why are you wearing this stupid man suit?" to me, and then they started quoting Napoleon Dynamite instead. Thank God.
Yeah. Well, this was actually quite cathartic for me, Despot. I'm glad, because a lot of these films, it's like bringing out, this is how I felt, and now it's good to see that legitimized. So thanks.
Yeah, it is nice.
All right. Well, is that the end of that little session?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, great. Well, that pretty much is going to take us through to the end. We just have some little super chats to go through here. Our dear old friend, M8566. I can't abide M8565, but M8566 is a wonderful contributor to our channel. Gifted 5 Echo Chamberlain memberships. So thank you very much, sir. That's always appreciated. Joey Bag of Donuts for $4.99 here. Thanks for helping fill the void of entertainment. Great panel as always. Keep on keeping on. Well, thanks, man. Yeah, we're doing our best. Glad you're enjoying the content. Joshua, my presiding saint, without whom my life would be like a balsa twig in a tornado. Thoughts on the trailer for number 1 Happy Family USA? I'm not familiar with this. Anyone on?
It's basically just Velma for Muslims. That's it.
Oh, that's an interesting elevator pitch.
It's edgy.
Yeah, that's the weirdest elevator pitch I've ever heard, but I don't know. I'm kind of piqued my curiosity now. And last of all, I Lucifer 1999 for Australian $2. Love Actually New Zealand has New Zealand people sodomizing sheep. Well, all films that come out of New Zealand have sheep sodomization at some stage. That's just part of the culture. So the New Zealand Film Commission, you get extra funding if there's that element in there. And Realistic Delinquent, what's that currency?
Canadian rupees.
I don't know what it is. Canadian work dollars?
It's $2.79 because we're tariffing the shit out of that right now. So
Yeah.
Oh yeah. For $2.79. Thanks for inviting the editor. Well, yes, absolutely. So that's about it for today. All that remains for me is to go around the horn. And Greg, now that you've revived from your being on contract, not getting paid overtime 90-hour weeks, what do you got coming up for the folks?
I'm gonna make a happy video about video games that I'm super duper excited. It's gonna be a glaze fest. Like I'm making a stained glass window, baby. It's gonna be nothing but positivity. I'm super pumped about that. And then afterward, I don't know. I got some other stuff I'm working on, I guess.
You're making a positive video. You're only going to get 5,000 views. What's wrong with you?
That's right. It's gonna do so bad, but I don't care. I just want to make it. I'm very happy about some stuff that's coming up.
All right. Random, for whom it is, I think, 2:40 in the morning.
In video.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go to bed. Yeah, no. After I go to bed at some point. I'm currently like balls deep on covering Arcane season 2.
All right.
I am deathly sorry, Greg, but it had to be done.
Oh, fuck. By the way, I love that.
I'm glad you're doing it.
That is a great video. Your Arcane season 2 video.
Thank you. Much
I still think that your video on Mission Impossible, what was it, the latest one? It's still my favorite pop culture video of last year. That thing is so funny and so brilliant because I knew when I was watching that, I know I'm not crazy. And then you could just go through and explain to me why I wasn't crazy. So that's such a great video. I love it.
Yeah, that film confused the hell out of me when I first watched it. I was like, wait, why? No, you can't do that.
Yeah.
That's cheating.
Despot, what can you tell the folks? We'd do a video from you. You had the Me Too
Concord
movement video, which is doing extremely good.
That was a re-up.
All right.
It's another re-up. It's my Napoleon video, which was copyright claimed and blocked in December.
Oh.
So I've remastered the whole thing, and I've added a 20-minute section which deals with the director's cut. The director's cut is terrible. So if you've already seen that video and you just want to check out the director's cut section, that'll be timestamped. So that's what I'll be doing. I think that's going up on Sunday, maybe.
Mm-hmm. And today's featured guest, Kristin McTiernan. Thank you so much for coming along. You've been a blast. You've lifted the standard with us blokes rambling on. So we're very much appreciative of you being here. What can you tell the folks? What videos can we direct them to? And what you got coming up?
Well, the series on men's fiction and the most recently dropped one, boys fiction, is doing very well over on the Nonsense Free Editor. That's my main channel. And then I'm also spinning up the Fictional Influence channel. And that video will drop by the end of the month. And that's going to be a commentary on Z Nation, the sci-fi show that was more of a wacky version of The Walking Dead, and how it's actually a secret Calvinist show. I don't think the writers intended that, but it was.
Great. Well, look out for that. So, yeah, that's about it for today. I think we've covered everything and solved every issue and problem outstanding in the world of popular entertainment and culture between the five of us. So that's it. So thanks, everyone, wherever you are in the world. Ka kite anō, haere rā. And we'll see you on the next one. So bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.